Chapter 327. Xiao Xian followed Xueqi and the others into the Colosseum. In the huge Colosseum made of stones, the edge was a grandstand, while the middle of nearly 10,000 square meters was sunken. It was similar to the pit in the Beast City, but the scale here was larger and the structure was more exquisite. The huge sunken pit reminded Xiao Xian of the original pit in Bat Mountain. The pit walls were surrounded by huge stones. Looking at the stone quality, it was at least above average. For many slaves who could not even use good stone, the construction here was simply extravagant. The kings of each city took their own slave owners and slaves to their respective places to sit down. In the place where the king was, there was a special installation of hanging cloth, used to shade the sun or block the snow. A few carved bamboos were propped up there, and the slaves quickly put the cloth over them. Even if there was no sun today, it could still block the wind and snow. The people who presided over this beast fighting game were naturally the kings from the 3 major cities. They took turns to preside over it every year, and this year it was Snowfield City's turn. The Snowfield City's king first sent people to the big slave owners of each city to arrange the order of fighting beasts. Xueqi went to Su Luan's side to take a look, and then made a 4-finger gesture to Xiao Xian. In other words, today, Baisha City's arranged fighting beast was the 4th to appear. The first one is the opening battle arranged by Snowfield City itself. It was actually arranged by the Snowfield City's young master. Xueqi exclaimed. In the arrangement of the sequence, the others were not written in detail, only a serial number. Only the opening battle was written in great detail, which almost made the Snowfield City's young master fly. Although the battle in the Colosseum was only the entertainment of the big slave owners, the slaves used it to fight for merits. However, for the slave owners, especially those who were interested in competing for the throne, they would also use this method to prove their strength in front of their fathers. If they won, their faces would also be bright. After the Snowfield City's king announced the start, the field was quiet. Rumble in the pit, the sound of the huge stone slab door lifting sounded. Xiao Xian listened to the sound of the heavy stone door and looked at the huge stone slab. He was sure that the stone slab was at least of high quality, even better than the stones on the walls of the pit. Such a good stone would definitely be used to make weapons in the tribe, but here, the slave owners only used it to make a door. That was a whole piece of high-quality stone, not pieced together. It was not easy to find such a piece of stone. Compared to the weapons in the hands of most of the middle and lower-class slaves, and then looking at the facilities in the Colosseum, if the tribesmen were here, they would certainly not be able to understand the thinking of the slave owners. Wasn't this a waste? It was simply extravagant. After the heavy stone door was opened, there was no huge ferocious beast. Instead, there was a man with a golden body that was much brighter than the golden fur that Xueqi wore. That was the young master of Snowfield City who played in the opening battle. When Xiao Xian saw the Snowfield young master, he was stunned and shocked. It was not that the Snowfield City young master looked intimidating, but that dazzling equipment made Xiao Xian quite surprised. Anyone who suddenly saw a person wearing metal armor in an environment full of Stone Age equipment would have the same reaction. Before, when Xiao Xian saw the piece of gold that Xueqi treated as a treasure, he wondered if there was a metal mine here. After all, from the beginning to the present, Xiao Xian had not found a metal ore suitable for smelting. Originally, he thought that the stone in this world was different. There was no ore, and even if there was, it would be difficult to distinguish, so he gave up looking for a metal mine. In the desert, Xiao Xian did not see Xueqi and the other slave owners use metal equipment. Even the knife was the same as Xiao Xian's stone knife, but the style was gorgeous. But now, Xiao Xian's original idea collapsed. The Snowfield City young master wore an almost golden armor and held a big axe in his hand. It was also similar to the golden color. The axe body was engraved with some patterns, and the blade was curved. Gold? No, it couldn't be gold. Was it bronze? Thinking of this, Xiao Xian's heart suddenly set off waves. Bronze. Could it be that there was a metal mine in Snowfield City? He looked at the other slave owners. In addition to envy and jealousy, there was no shock, including Xueqi. This showed that they all knew that there was such a metal. What, are you stupid? Xueqi saw Xiao Xian's expression and laughed. That is made of stone. It's just that, almost 99% of the stones are in the hands of the 3 major cities. Oregon ores that could smelt metal were in the hands of the 3 major cities. However, where did those ores come from? Do you think those are crazy? Xueqi looked at the dazzling armor and axe of the Snowfield City young master in the field. His eyes flashed with strong envy and jealousy as he murmured, "Power, powerful strength." Thinking of something, Xueqi lowered his voice and said to Xian, "Although outside of the three major cities, there are also people in other cities. Many of them are gifts from the three major cities. They are also in the hands of the kings of the cities. My father's sword is one of them. And you, the tribesman, are thinking about it." Xian's eyelids jumped. Xueqi's words meant that the other tribes were thinking about the metal ores of the three major cities. No wonder he always felt that those tribes who came to the desert had some secrets. It seemed that one of the secrets was these metals. In the field, the Snowfield City young master was wearing a golden armor, holding a battle axe and howling to the sky. The people of the other cities had not yet responded, but the people of Snowfield City immediately followed up with a howl, cheering for their own young master. The howl was always inspiring. Rumble. In the field, the opposite heavy stone door opened. A giant beast with a back nearly 10 meters high walked into the field from the other side of the door. Its thick limbs and fat body looked thick and heavy. It looked like a hornless rhinoceros. Every time it took a step, there would be a bang, and the ground in the field would be shaken up. The green skin was somewhat dry and cracked, not knowing if it was because of the climate or other reasons. "Hey!" Xian heard someone whisper to Xueqi. "That beast doesn't seem to be as powerful as it looks." Not only the people of Luoye City, but the people of other cities also saw it. This beast just looked big. In terms of aggression and threat, it was not comparable to other fighting beasts that could appear in the Colosseum. Moreover, this beast was mostly vegetarian. They didn't know where the Snowfield people got this beast, but it could not live in the desert. Some people despised it. No wonder the Snowfield City young master dared to carry the opening battle. They dared to find such a fierce beast. However, the people of Snowfield City refuted. "You can go, even if this beast is just a facade, what about it? At least our Snowfield City young master dares to play." The satirists immediately shut up. Even if it was a relatively weak beast, it was still a fierce beast. It was very risky to go down and fight. If they were crushed by the thick fat legs, they would become a meat patty. If they really fought, the people in the stands would have no time to rescue them. They still cherished their lives more. Bang, 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 bang. The huge body walked into the field. Probably because it was not used to the atmosphere here, the giant beast roared, as if it was demonstrating. The beast's thunderous roar sounded in the Colosseum. It was as if they had heard a signal. Before the roar of the beast stopped, the young slave owners in the stands began to cry out in a strange manner. "Dash, woo 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 woo. Kill, kill." Although the people of other cities saw the Snowfield City young master's nouveau riche gold equipment, as well as the seemingly fierce beast, they had some ideas in their hearts. However, in the roar of other people, their emotions were also driven. At this time, what was the point of thinking so much? It was better to enjoy the fun here. Even the young female slave owners, who had pretended to be well-behaved all morning, screamed out. For a time, the whole field was like boiling water, and the atmosphere was warm. Each big slave owner brought in about 1,000 people here. There were more people in the three major cities, so there were nearly 10,000 people. In the circular Colosseum, the sound waves were like a vortex, as if to suck everyone in. The people in the stands, even if they were calm, would be affected by such an atmosphere and would no longer be calm. Chapter 328. There was no snow on this day, and the sun was high in the sky. Where the big slave owners sat, the tarpaulin covering Yangguang and the surrounding flags painted with the city's symbols were fluttering in the wind. In the field, Yangguang was glowing with golden light. He swung the axe in his hand and faced the behemoth. One step at a time, each blow seemed to use the strength of his whole body. A series of steps, each step was extremely strong. The sound of footsteps on the ground came one after another. There were behemoths, and there were also beasts. Like the beating of war drums, it added a bit of awe and shock to the battlefield. Although Snowfield City arranged this opening battle, there was a suspicion that it was a show. However, the next beast-fighting young master of Snowfield City did have his strength. He had strength and knew how to fight flexibly. After chopping, he would avoid the counterattack of the behemoth. The armor on the important parts of his body would block the cracked stones on the wall. Because the ground of the battlefield in the middle of the Colosseum was full of sand, it was also called a sandfield by the slave owners. The sand in the sandfield was screened. It was some sand with relatively large particles. Even in the desert sandstorm, it would fly close to the ground. It would not be like the sand in the Colosseum that could float lightly, which would interfere with the viewing. The good battle that the slave owners thought of must be blood-stained in the battlefield. The more it was dyed, the better. Otherwise, it would be considered a failed battle. In the sandfield, the sand was shaken up and hit the surrounding walls, making a rainstorm-like sound. The axe blade chopped on the behemoth, leaving a blood-red scar. On the huge body of the behemoth, the blood was like a spring, flowing into the sand of the Colosseum. Madness, in this wide Colosseum, and the shouts and cheers of the slave owners in the stands, brewed and broke out. The behemoth finally roared unwillingly and fell to the ground. The young master of Snowfield City raised his axe and shouted as he walked around the Colosseum. The golden armor had been stained red with the blood of the behemoth. Like an Azura in the killing field, the young master of Snowfield City looked quite overbearing and arrogant. When the Snowfield City's great slave owner, the Snowfield King, saw this scene, he smiled with satisfaction. How could the person who would inherit his throne in the future not have any strength? Today's battle was to let everyone see more of the future Snowfield King. No matter what other people think, anyway, the Snowfield King thinks that his child is more capable than other families. The complacency on his face has not disappeared until the start of the next battle. Just as everyone was discussing the future Snowfield King who had just finished the beast battle, in the Rock Tomb City's grandstand area, Xueqi was holding a delicate wine glass and slowly tasting the wine inside. Hearing the discussions around him, he did not express his opinion. He just smiled, as if he did not care about the peer who was in the limelight. The first round ended perfectly. After a little cleaning up, the second round began. Most of the young slave owners liked to watch the competition between beasts. It was exciting to watch, but the older ones preferred to watch the battle between humans and beasts. Therefore, many slaves who were ambitious and wanted to climb up the ranks began to cater to his interests, and spontaneously stood up to express their willingness to play. At the beginning of the second round, the fighting beasts were no longer just for show. When the battle really began, it could be seen that this was indeed a thrilling and cruel battle. Unlike the gorgeous show of the opening battle, it was a bloody and cruel beast fighting activity to satisfy the slave owners' intention to have fun. The slave owners usually raised the fighting beasts to be fat and round, but a few days before the opening of the Colosseum, they would suspend feeding or greatly reduce the feeding of food. They deliberately let them have a little bit of hunger, because this would enhance the ferocity of the fighting beasts. When these strategically fed fighting beasts were brought to the entrance passage and walked into the battlefield through the opened heavy stone door, these greedy fighting beasts that had been trapped in one place for a long time were finally liberated. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they roared towards the sky. Their roars were like rolling thunder, making the entire Colosseum seem to shake. It gave the people in the stands a kind of hair-raising stimulation. The second game was played by the two senior slaves of Fire Hill City. Each battle did not limit how many people could participate, so sometimes there were more people participating in the battle, and sometimes there were fewer. Of the two slaves, one seemed to be physically weak, but it revealed a sense of cleverness and cunning, and its movements were agile when fighting. On the other hand, the other was a complete strength-type slave. Every strike of his was powerful enough. The cooperation of these two people made the battle more enjoyable, at least to the satisfaction of the city lords. Without the provocation of the beasts, the fighting beasts that were finally released urgently needed to release their killing intent. People killing beasts, beasts killing people. It was tense and exciting. Within the bestial battle arena, miserable screams, shouts, strange howls, and cheers were all connected together, forming a vortex within the bestial battle arena that sucked in everyone's emotions. It practically tore apart all other distracting thoughts, leaving only madness. At the end of the second battle, whether it was the fighting beast or the two slaves, they were all seriously injured. Both sides lost the ability to continue fighting. Finally, the Snowfield City Lord had to judge the end of the second game. As for who won and who lost, it was not important. The important thing was that they enjoyed the process. As for the rest, it was left to the people of Fire Hill City to worry about. After all, the slaves in the second game were their city's people, so losing the face of Fire Hill City was also a loss. Seeing the anger on the Fire Hill City Lord's face, the Snowfield City Lord's mood was better. The third game was a contest between the two beasts, between Xueqi City and Skywheel City. In the gap before the start of the third game, the Luoye city king Su Luan let the slaves around him bring a message to Su Gu. Father asked you to prepare for the fourth game. Su Gu's face was complicated. If this collaborator fought to death, wouldn't he lose a lot of benefits? Xiao Xian was only slightly surprised when he heard this. He said that if Lei and Tuo were forced to play, he would also follow. But now, the third game had just begun, and the people in the fourth game had not been seen. How did Su Luan know? It seemed that Su Luan did not know anything about the arrangement of Baisher City. He had his means to understand. I know. Xiao Xian nodded. He had long been psychologically prepared and was not surprised. Also, Su Gu lowered his voice and said to Xiao Xian, Baisher City is preparing a horned lizard beast that has just been caught not long ago. It has not been enslaved, and its wild nature is very strong. Moreover, the horned lizard beast is not as easily angered as other fighting beasts. It knows how to judge the situation very well. If you intend to use any strategy to induce it to go crazy, and then find a loophole to start, you may not succeed. Su Gu told Xiao Xian about the desert horned lizard's habits and fighting methods. The horned lizard beast could rarely be trapped by people. The lure of food and other means had limited effect on them. At the same time, the horned lizard beast's rejection of other creatures was also very strong. If it met other people on the same battlefield, the horned lizard beast would certainly kill all these people, leaving no one alive. It is said that the Baisher king told several city lords that the arranged battle would certainly satisfy everyone. Su Gu said. Under normal circumstances, the beast fighting was a contest between several cities, such as the second and third game. But sometimes, it was arranged by the cities themselves, such as the opening battle of the first game, or the fourth game arranged by Baisher City. Can you predict it for yourself? Su Gu asked. No. Xiao Xian replied. He also tried divination, but did not get an exact prediction. But he felt that something big was brewing. You have to be careful. If you can't win, then find a chance to avoid it as much as possible. Alas! Su Gu was not optimistic about Xiao Xian. Even if the three people from Yanjiao played at the same time, even if they could use their peak strength, this was not the mountains or jungles. There was no place to hide, so they could only brace themselves to face it. Besides, Xiao Xian's three people's strength was not very good. In other places it was okay, but in the Colosseum, a place where the strong were like clouds, it was not enough to look at. Xiao Xian's breakthrough to a senior totem warrior was not told to others. Therefore, Su Gu did not know that Xiao Xian's strength had improved. Even if he knew, he would still not be optimistic. Okay, I'll go down first. Xiao Xian pulled the hat on his clothes and followed Ai Shi to leave the stands. Behind the stands, there was a staircase leading to the bottom of the Colosseum. From there, they could reach the passage into the battlefield. Chapter 329. After walking down the steps, the surroundings seemed a little dark and empty. The window was located above the head, but the light that came through was limited. There were many slaves from the three major cities around here, probably to prevent any accidents. After seeing Xiao Xian, those people stopped and asked. When they heard that he was going to play in the next game, they saw Ai Shi take out a wooden card given by the Luoye city king. They simply let him go, but they also reminded him, you can't go in now. You have to wait. There are people from Baisher City over there. Xiao Xian looked over. At the entrance of the passage, there were indeed more than a dozen people from Baisher City. Xiao Xian wanted to see if there was Lei and Tuo in the passage, but he was stopped before he got close. Baisher City and Luoye City were disgusted with each other and had a lot of grievances. When Ai Shi took Xiao Xian down, he also called people to follow. Now the two sides were confronting each other at the entrance of this passage. Is there anyone else in the next game? Xiao Xian asked loudly. If Lei and Tuo were in the passage, they would respond. Sure enough, after Xiao Xian's voice fell, Tuo's voice came from the passage. Xian. Probably Tuo wanted to come out, but he was stopped. Xian, what are you doing here? Leave. Tuo hurriedly said. What are you shouting for? The voice of the Baisher City people came from the passage, followed by the sound of fighting. Xiao Xian's eyes were sharp, and he kicked the nearest Baisher City person. This kick also ignited the line of fire on both sides of Baisher City and Luoye City. The two sides looked at each other and suddenly fought. The guards of the three major cities around yelled and ran over, violently pulling the two sides apart. When the two sides stopped fighting because of the intervention of the guards of the three major cities, Xian had already entered the passage. In the passage, the light was dimmer, but it was enough for Xian to see the situation inside. Tuo was standing against the wall. Perhaps he had just had a brief fight with the Baisher city people. He was standing there gasping for breath. Next to Tuo, Lei was sitting on the ground, and it seemed that the situation was not good. He checked Rei's condition. His life was not in danger for the time being. Only a few of his ribs were broken and his internal organs were injured. Xian gave Tuo and Lei some of the medicine he had with him, and then looked at the others around him. Yes, in addition to Lei and Tuo, there were 4 people Xian knew. 2 of them were from the Feather Tribe and the other 2 were from the Tian Shan Tribe. All 4 of them had different degrees of injuries. In addition to them, there were 4 other slaves with whip scars on their bodies. One of them had been chopped off at the wrist. It was estimated that they were the guilty slaves who had committed a crime and were thrown here by Baisher. Xian only knew that there were many people in the wooden box in Baisher City. He was not sure whether Lei and Tuo were in it. Now it seemed that not only Lei and Tuo, but also the other 4 tribesmen and the guilty slaves. Including Lei and Tuo, Baisher City had prepared a total of 10 people, all of whom were going to play in the 4th game. To be exact, they were the sacrifices prepared for the 4th game. After all, in the current state of these 10 people, it was impossible to win against a specially prepared fighting beast. Taking advantage of this time, Tuo told Xian about how they were caught that day. It was because they saw the Feather Tribe and the Tian Shan Tribe that they fell into the Baisher people's trap. Also, Tuo's face was solemn. Xian, that day I also saw the symbol of the Wansher tribe. The Wansher tribe had a relationship with the slave owners. Xian had long known that, but he did not expect that the connection was with the Baisher people. Were they all stones? In addition to these, we also saw Dao Yu. Tuo couldn't bear to mention it. Lei and I couldn't beat him. Lei's injuries were caused by Dao Yu. Being beaten like this by a traitor who was once a wanderer, Lei and Tuo felt that they had lost Yanjiao's face. They had no face to see the shaman and the chief. Now, in front of Xian, they also hung their heads low. Now is not the time to talk about this. Seize the time to regulate your breathing. Xian said. Tuo and Lei wanted to say something, but were stopped by Xian. The remaining herbs were distributed to several other people by Xian. The spirit of the 4 people of the Feather Tribe and the Tian Shan Tribe was not very good, especially the 2 people of the Feather Tribe. They were very young and had never experienced such a thing, with uneasiness and frustration. The people of the Tian Shan Tribe did not have bows and arrows in their hands, and they felt that their confidence was greatly reduced. When they joined the travel team, they thought that they might die, but they never thought that they would face such a situation. Beast City. They would rather be eaten by beasts in the desert than die in such a place in humiliation. Suicide? It seemed that they did not have the courage. Lei and Tuo had the courage to commit suicide, but they were not reconciled. Wasn't it just a beast fight? If they wanted to fight, then they would fight. For them, fighting to death was better than committing suicide. In the battlefield separated by a door, the sound of the beast fight clearly passed into everyone's ears, and their hearts trembled. The legs of a young warrior of the Feather Tribe were shaking, and this was after their experience. If it was before the desert experience, they probably would have been unable to bear the pressure and howled. Escape from here. It was not that they didn't think about it, but at the end of the passage, there were layers of guards, and there were archers waiting above, so there was no way to break out. And what about them? They didn't even have a stone in their hands. How to fight? Were they looking for death? The vibration on the other side of the door was getting smaller and smaller, and it was not as fierce as before. After a few howls of beasts, everyone realized that the 3rd game was coming to an end. When everything calmed down, the passage was so quiet that even the sound of a needle falling could be heard. Even the sound of everyone's breathing could be heard clearly. There was a wind blowing, with decay and blood, as well as a chill that made people nervous and tremble. Not long after, a group of people holding weapons came from the entrance of the passage. The man in the lead had a malicious smile, pointing at Xian and others with the tip of his knife. It's time to go in. This sounded like, it's time to go on the road. Rumble. The heavy stone door opened, and the dazzling light made the people who stayed in the passage couldn't help but reach out to block it. Although some sand would be replaced after the end of each game in the battlefield, the blood left by the previous battles could not be erased. The guards behind urged them to go to the battlefield. If they didn't go, they would swing their knives, but they were blocked by Xueqi. The guard who was blocked wanted to make 2 more knives, but Xueqi said, "Why, do you want to go in with us?" The guard's movement paused and stepped back. He didn't want to go in and fight with the fighting beasts. Xueqi didn't look at the others and walked into the battlefield. Lei and Tuo followed closely. The 4 people of the Yu tribe and the Tian Shan tribe looked at each other and could only lift their feet and walk in. The last 4 slaves were kicked into the battlefield by the guards. The heavy stone door closed, blocking their way back. Pa 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 pa. More than a dozen stone knives were thrown from the upper stands. The edges of the knives were sharpened, and the stone was good, medium and high. Several people who entered the field quickly grabbed a knife in their hands. The stone door at the other end of the battlefield opposite them opened with a bang, and a giant beast with conical thorns walked into the field unhurriedly. At the same time, on the other side of the Colosseum, where the fighting beasts entered the passage, there was a tall building where various fighting beasts that were about to participate in the Colosseum were locked up. They were opened and closed separately, and in one of the single rooms where the fighting beasts were locked, a beetle broke through the ground. Chapter 330. In the place where the fighting beasts were kept, in a warehouse-like house, a giant beast was lying there quietly. It was a bull with big pointed horns, and if the outside light was good, one could see the brown fur. It was the fighting beast that had appeared every year in Red Star City for the past 5 years, winning 5 battles. Because some of the patterns on its back were like flames, it was also called the Flame Bull by the people of Red Star City. This Flame Bull had been enslaved by the Red Star City Lord, and it was not the first time it had participated in the Colosseum. It had even been used as the finale many times. The sound from the Colosseum made it annoyed, but it was not crazy. There were also some drugs around that could make them temporarily calm down. There was not much light coming through the few holes in the slate, but the dim environment did not have much impact on it. Suddenly, it heard movement on the ground and looked over, only to see a bug crawling out of the ground. The Flame Bull did not pay attention to it. After looking at it, it continued to rest and prepare for the next battle. Just a bug, why bother looking? However, it did not pay attention to it. The bug was restless, biting and scratching every once in a while, and it was becoming more and more rampant. The shaking of the bull's tail could not expel it. The speed of the bug was quite fast. It was annoying. In order to participate in the battle, it would be hungry for a day or 2 like most of the fighting beasts. Although there would still be food supply in these days, it was much less than the previous careful breeding. In addition, after coming to the Colosseum, it had not eaten its favorite kind of grass. In the past, when it was in Red Star City, there were slaves who transported the grass every few days. But after coming here, it could only eat hay and some other plants that did not taste good. It was a little hot. The Flame Bull's 2 big nostrils spewed out hot air, and its calm mood was faintly fluctuating. On the other side in the Colosseum, Xueqi looked at the horned lizard beast that walked into the battlefield. Its body was flat, and its torso was oval. From a distance, it looked like a toad with thorns, but there was a tail behind it that was not long. The back of this horned lizard beast was dark sand, and its whole body was covered with thorny scales, like a sharp spearhead, like armor. In addition to those cone-shaped thorns, there were also some coarse-scaled thorns. The horned lizard beast looked very fierce, especially the sharp short thorns. Even if it was only used for defense and not attack, it was enough to give people a headache. The horned lizard beast moved its 4 limbs and walked to the center of the battlefield. The roars from the surrounding stands made it very uncomfortable. It turned its stubby neck and swept around. Then, its sight fell on Xueqi and the others. It had a reddish-brown head, and there were some dried red marks around its eyes, which made its eyes look even more strange, especially when it glanced at Xueqi and the others. Looking into those eyes, Xueqi could hear the people behind him gulping. He could even hear their hearts beating faster. Even Lei and Tuo, who had hunted for many years, could not maintain the mentality of the previous hunting. There was no shelter around. This was a completely direct confrontation. The giant beast in the middle of the battlefield opened its mouth and roared at Xueqi and the others. The sound was not as high-pitched as the previous beasts, nor was it the kind of heavy thunder drum sound. It was like the sound of a storm sweeping through the sand dunes. It made people feel their hair stand on end. With the roar, the rapid airflow blew up the sand on the battlefield. The oncoming sand made everyone's eyes narrow, but they did not dare to move away. They were afraid that if they moved, they would miss the opportunity to escape. "Xian, what should we do?" Tuo asked. "Wait first." Xiao Xian observed the horned lizard beast, recalling the information Su Gu gave him to determine the feasibility of the strategy. He didn't really want to fight with such a fierce beast here. If he really fought with his life, the already injured Lei and Tuo would not be spared. From the previous 2 battles, he could see the destructive power of the fighting beasts in the battlefield. Especially Lei, who probably endured the pain while running, so his movement was naturally severely limited. After the horned lizard beast in the battlefield roared, it moved its 4 limbs and sped up its pace. It went to the place where Xiao Xian and the others were. With every step, a lot of sand was kicked up. Xiao Xian and the others had not yet moved, but the 4 slaves in the back began to shout and run away. The horned lizard beast was originally heading in the direction of Xiao Xian and the others, but when it saw the people running away, it put its attention on the people running. Looking at its cumbersome body, each step was huge, and within a few steps, it had already caught up with the slave running in the front. The horned lizard beast did not stretch out its relatively short limbs, nor did it swing its not-so-long tail. Instead, it directly slid and floated sideways, hitting the stone wall next to it. Boom! Sand and stones splashed, and the stones on the edge of the wall were hit by the hard horns on its body. A lot of stone chips fell off. The slave running in the front was sandwiched between the horned lizard beast and the wall of the battlefield. One could imagine his end. The rest of the people felt their breathing stagnant, and the hand holding the knife was shaking. The courage that they had just gathered was scattered into slag under this collision. "Oh dash good. Oh dash!" In the surrounding stands, the young slave owners were so excited that their faces turned red, and when they roared wildly, their faces looked ferocious. They heard that in addition to the 4 slaves who were obviously tanned, the others were tribal people, and this group of slave owners was even more excited. It turned out to be tribal people. "Kill, kill, kill! Kill them!" The shouts shook the sky. The horned lizard beast that hit the wall twisted its short spotted neck and looked at the others. The slave closest to the horned lizard beast did not dare to run forward again. Seeing the horned lizard beast focus on him, the slave did not have the courage to lift his knife and turn to run. This time he did not run around, but went back, toward the place where Xiao Xian and the others were. But this time, the horned lizard beast did not immediately accelerate to chase. Instead, it took a step and shook off the stone and sand on its body. It did not look at the slave who had been squeezed into a meat patty. Step by step, it walked in the direction of Xiao Xian and the others. Its eyes were slightly closed, and it looked somewhat absent-minded. After the scene just now, no one dared to relax their vigilance. Their nerves were tense, and their hearts were hanging high as they stared at the approaching beast. Looking at the approaching beast, a slave glanced at Xiao Xian and the others who were still standing there. He gritted his teeth and ran out. However, after running a few steps, he stiffly stopped because he found that the horned lizard beast had focused its attention on him. The slave who was frozen there like a sculpture maintained his running posture. He did not dare to look directly at the other side. He only observed with his peripheral vision and did not care about the sweat dripping from his forehead. Seeing that the slave was no longer running, the horned lizard beast seemed a little disappointed and put its eyes on the place with the most people. After looking for a while, it suddenly took 2 steps forward. The 4 people of the Yu tribe and the Tianshan tribe also wanted to stay with the 3 people of the Yanjiao tribe, so that they could share a lot of the pressure. But looking at the approaching beast, their hearts were also drumming, hesitating whether to stay away. Seeing the horned lizard beast step forward, the thunder-like impact flashed in the minds of several people, and their conditioned reflexes retreated far away. However, the battlefield was circular, and they were already close to the edge. Even if they retreated, they could only retreat along the edge of the circular arc. They thought that the horned lizard beast would make another thunderous impact, but unexpectedly, it took 2 steps, stopped, and roared again. The sand on the ground rushed straight to the place where Xiao Xian and the others were. The 3 slaves could not help but retreat a little. They did not run, but moved step by step, trying not to attract the attention of the horned lizard beast. The people of the Yu tribe and the Tianshan tribe had already retreated several steps. Now facing the impact of the sand, they retreated again. In this way, the closest to the beast were the 3 people of the Yanjiao tribe. Seeing this scene, the other 7 of the remaining 10 people in the field obviously took a breath. In any case, the first to face the attack of the beast must be the 3 of them. Tuo and Lei focused on Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian did not move, and they did not move. The outer cloth was blown back by the wind. Xian pulled the hat on his head and lifted his foot in the direction of the beast. Xian moved, and Lei and Tuo also moved. Probably feeling that Xian issued an attack signal, Lei rushed forward with a knife. If it was during the hunt, he would not be so impulsive, but here, the pressure brought by the atmosphere pulled his nerves. After seeing the beast, he did not even think about leaving. Death is death. At least try to create some opportunities for Xian and Tuo. If they could hurt the beast a few times, it would be better. However, Lei, who was going to try his best to fight, had not run a step, and was thrown to Tuo by Xian. Xian lowered his voice and said quickly, "You two stay here first. If I can't stop it later, you can act according to the situation." Tuo still wanted to say something, but Xian waved his hand and continued to go to the beast. What is he going to do? A person of the Yu tribe said. Is he crazy? A person of the Tianshan tribe recalled that in the tribe, when the shaman heard the news of the Yanjiao tribe, his evaluation was that the Yanjiao people were like lunatics. Now it seemed that the Yanjiao people were really crazy. They did not even avoid it, but went forward. Not only the other people on the battlefield, but even the slave owners in the stands also felt that the man in the strange hooded cloth was looking for death. Xian, regardless of what other people thought, still went forward. His long sleeves covered his hands, so that people could not see whether he had a weapon or not. Xian did not retreat, but moved forward, making the beast stunned. It also did not care about other people, and its two slightly closed eyes opened a little bit, staring at the approaching people. Others could not feel it, but it could clearly perceive the man's increasing momentum with each step. 20 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. Xian could even smell the muddy smell of the beast's breath. The beast looked at the approaching people, roared, and raised a front paw, about to slap Xian. Xian was faster, and also raised an arm. All the momentum that had been accumulating in this moment burst out. In his mind, the totemic flame fiercely rolled, and the outer shell of the totemic flame became brighter. 5 beams of blue flame came out of the inside, like dragons coming out of the sea. They swam along the meridians, unstoppable, rushed over the arm, and emerged from the front of the 5 fingers of the raised arm. Whoosh! The blue flame wrapped around the palm. The moment the flame appeared, the sand raised by the beast's roar, with Xian as the center, quickly shook out layers of visible ripples in all directions. Chapter 331. This was the first time that Xian showed the blue flame in public. Although this was not a good idea, after revealing the blue flame, he would certainly be targeted by more slave owners. However, after thinking about it, this was the best way. After the blue flame appeared, the slave owners, who were originally excited in the stands, seemed to be strangled, one by one. That is. Isn't he a tribesman? How could there be a slave owner? Yes, who is that guy? I can't see clearly with a hat. As slave owners, they knew what such a blue flame represented since they were sensible. If they could not make such a blue flame, they would not be a real slave owner. Such a blue flame was a symbol of slavery. It was the proof of a slave owner. Not only the young slave owners, but even the several city lords could not help but straighten up. The people who were still sitting lazily, absent-mindedly tasting the wine, and the people who were intimate with the beautiful concubines, all turned their eyes to the battlefield. In particular, Xueqi, who originally had some worries, was now so shocked that his jaw almost fell. Slave owner? What a slave owner! No one knew better than him that Xian was a tribesman. A real tribesman. When he was in the oasis, he also saw Xian's totem pattern. How could he be a slave owner? At this time, Xueqi suddenly remembered that Xian had asked him a question. Can a tribesman enslave a slave? How did he answer at that time? Impossible? Xueqi stretched his neck and looked at the scene on the battlefield. He rubbed his eyes. It was indeed the blue flame. On the Baisher side, Dao Yu, who originally saw Xian on the field, was still sneering in his heart. He wanted to see the tragedy of the 3 people. At this moment, his face changed again and again. He now suddenly regretted it. How could he ignore such a person? He was sure that the kid was a real tribesman. Because of this, his heart was faintly worried and afraid. If he had known this, he would certainly not hesitate to get rid of this big threat first. The Baisher king now wanted to throw his cup. What about a tribesman? How could he become a slave owner? What? You said that was a tribesman. Bastard! Do you think I don't have eyes? Could the tribesman be enslaved? Could the tribesman make such a blue fire? Fuck, that fire is even bigger than mine. The White Stone King felt suffocated. Several slaves around caught a glimpse of the White Stone King's gloomy eyes and quickly lowered their heads for fear of being angered. However, the White Stone King loves his face. Even if the arrangement goes wrong, he has to endure it for the time being. He can't fly into a rage immediately. Otherwise, he will be laughed at by the other city lords for his ability to control the situation. Therefore, Bai Sherwang not only could not vent now, but also had to put on airs, as if everything was under his control. On the battlefield, Xiao Xian faced the giant beast and raised his arm. The flame on his palm floated against the sand and air currents towards the giant beast. He was like a predator that had smelled delicious food, ready to make a move. The horned lizard beast lifted its thick forelimb. At the moment when the blue flame appeared, it froze. The roar stopped and roared again, several times in a row, as if to demonstrate to Xiao Xian. To be able to get a giant desert beast to demonstrate its power, it must have classified them as a threat. The previous roars were just its way of venting and teasing. Now, the roar was a show of force. It stared at Xiao Xian, looking at the blue flame with fear. Xiao Xian raised his head slightly. Because of the hat on his head, the people standing on the high platform could not see Xiao Xian's face, but the giant beast saw it. On Xiao Xian's face, the dark totem patterns that were originally exposed became as red as magma. If there were no clothes to cover it, you could see that the totem patterns in other places on Xiao Xian's body were similar. After a series of roars, the giant beast lifted its forelimb and moved. Just when the people in the stands thought that the giant beast would show its power and smash the boy who dared to show the enslavement flame in front of it into a meat patty, they found that the truth was not what they thought. The giant beast's raised forelimb not only did not move forward, but fell back. It was retreating. Such a giant beast, it actually retreated. People who have enslaved fighting beasts know that they will resist when enslaved, so many people will let slaves help control them when enslaving them. But what about the one off the field? Why did it retreat? This was only known to the horned lizard beast that faced Xiao Xian at close range. Those who were far away would not be able to feel the power, but it could clearly feel it. No, it can't go over. So it chose to retreat, roaring as it retreated, as if facing a great enemy. Taking a step back shows that it is timid and afraid. At this time, Xiao Xian once again took a step forward, even more imposing and decisive than before. The blue flame in his hand once again floated to the giant beast's side. Xiao Xian knew that after this horned lizard beast was caught, it became cautious and ate a loss. Naturally, its attitude towards people was more careful. After entering the battlefield, the first step it did was just to test the strength of the people on the field and the hardness of the surrounding walls. The people here did not seem to be strong and did not pose much of a threat. It also tested the hardness of the walls and found that it was difficult to break. It temporarily put its eyes on Xiao Xian and the others, wanting to vent. But now it was aware of the threat, but the line of its heart did not collapse. At this time, it could not show fear and hesitation. The more powerful Xiao Xian was, the more the giant beast would doubt itself. Yes, Sugu said that this beast was very smart, but the smarter it was, the more it would think. It was not like some fighting beasts, which were straightforward and did not think much about the style of fighting directly. Dao Yu and the people of Baisha City did not think that they would deliberately pick such a tricky beast, but instead, it helped Xiao Xian. Listening to the roar of the giant beast now, compared to the strength at the beginning, it now sounded like a fierce appearance but weak inside. Seeing Xiao Xian pressing on, it continued to move back. Its tail hit the wall, so it had to turn in another direction and continue to retreat. The successive roars continued to lift the sand on the ground, as if to blow out the fire in Xiao Xian's hand. However, this round of sandstorms could not break through this layer of barrier. Moreover, the fire from the fire seed could not be blown out by the wind and covered by the sand. How could it be extinguished by the roar of a fierce beast? One retreated, one advanced. Xiao Xian pushed the horned lizard beast from one side of the battlefield, step by step, to the middle of the battlefield, and continued to push. It was not only the other people on the battlefield who were stunned, but even the countless experienced slave owners in the stands who were watching the war were also stunned. What was this situation? This Beast City rarely seen in hundreds of years. Who the hell is that kid? He looks more arrogant than the snowfield's young master. Ah. Could it be that Baishur City specially arranged this? Is it one of the Baishur City's young masters? Whoever he is, hurry up and fight. Ah. That fighting beast. It's a waste to have such a fierce appearance. The slave owners in the stands did not know what expression to show. There were even people who threw items in their hands, such as pottery, stone tools, etc., at the giant beast in the battlefield, trying to arouse the giant beast's anger. However, after being smashed, the giant beast was indeed angry, but it was not directed at Xueqi. Instead, it turned its head in the direction of the smashing. It roared angrily, and the airflow rushed to the stands. The young slave owners who threw things in the stands quickly pulled the slaves around them in front of them. After roaring at the stands, the horned lizard beast turned its head and continued to retreat until its tail touched the wall of the battlefield. Xueqi had forced the giant beast from one side of the battlefield to the other side of the battlefield. There was no way to retreat. Some places around the giant beast's eyes began to stir, and its eyes even began to turn red. Xueqi guarded against the giant beast's final counterattack. He saw the changes around the giant beast's eyes become more and more obvious. The sense of swelling became stronger and stronger, and the redness around the eyes became more and more intense. Whoosh! 2 blood-colored liquids splashed from the giant beast's eyes. The battlefield exuded a strange smell of blood. Although it did not feel very unpleasant, it inexplicably made people feel that their stomachs were stirred, which was quite uncomfortable. It was not only the people on the battlefield. The wind carried the smell and drifted to the high stands. The slave owners who had been eating and drinking before directly vomited. Those who did not vomit also had a face full of vegetables. They could not wait to find a place to avoid it. However, the Luoya City King Su Luan laughed out loud at this time. He was happy to see the people of Baishur City suffer. No need to watch anymore. This 4th game is over. In the desert, if the horned lizard beast encountered a beast that it could not match, it would spray blood from its eyes to drive away the beast that posed a threat to its life. This horned lizard beast, when it was besieged and captured by the people of Baishur City, also had such a situation because it was extremely afraid. The red marks around its eyes when it was on the field were left behind at that time. Now, just one person made its eyes bleed again. To what extent was this fear? And on the field, who was the person who forced the horned lizard beast into this field? Even the Luoya City King was puzzled. Was it really from the tribe? In any case, when they saw the horned lizard beast's eyes bleed, the experienced people knew that this beast fight could not go on. It would be a waste of time to drag it out. However, although he understood it in his heart, the Snowfield King was not very pleasing to the eyes of the mysterious person on the field who was better than his son. He waved his hand. This fighting beast is not good. It has ruined everyone's interest. The Snowfield King's words were a naked slap in the face of the Baishur King. Before the start of this game, the Baishur King had said that he would make everyone happier. And the result? The words spoiled everyone's mood were 2 merciless slaps on Baishur King's face, which was loud enough. He did not look at the Baishur King, who was full of hostility. As the person who presided over the overall situation of this year's beast fight, the Snowfield King thought that Baishur City was a poor ghost. Catching such a good-for-nothing waste was really disappointing. In that case, I will let you see the ability of my Snowfield City. Change it to my Snowfield's fighting beast. Standing up, the Snowfield King cleared his throat. Although the Colosseum was big, he could let his voice spread to every part of the stands. Since the Baishur King's beast is a waste, then my Snowfield City will make up for it. Come. The Snowfield King's words had not yet finished when he heard a beast cry not far away. Moo! The Snowfield King, who was interrupted, was slightly angry in his heart. With an unhappy face, he paused and continued. Come bring, moo! There was another beast cry, this time louder than the previous one. The Snowfield King's face was even more unhappy. He snorted discontentedly and then said, Bring us, moo! This third sound even overwhelmed the voice of the Snowfield King. Interrupted one after another, the Snowfield King was so angry that he threw his cup and stared at the Red Star City side. This cry was from the flame bull of the Red Star City side. Although they were far away and there was a battlefield between them, the Red Star City Lord could still feel the sharp gaze that was like a substance. Many people from other cities also looked at the Red Star City side. With a slight cough, the Red Star City King turned around and said a few words to a few capable people next to him, letting them take care of it, but not to hurt the bull. Turning his head and not speaking, there was another loud roar of the beast. Others looked at the Red Star City King. The Red Star City King was about to say, "I have already sent people over." But just as he was about to speak, he suddenly slammed on the brakes. "Ha! That's not right. This cry is not from our family's bull, it's more like the one from Snowfield." Hearing this, everyone looked in the direction of Snowfield City. Standing there against the wind, the Snowfield King, wearing a white fur coat, was particularly conspicuous. The Snowfield King, whose face was blue because of the interruption, was even more blue now. Chapter 332. The first three cries that interrupted the Snowfield King's words were indeed from the famous flame bull of Red Star City. However, the following cries were not. The Snowfield King really could not refute this. How could he know that before he could say a few words, his own fighting beast would tear down his stage? The Snowfield King's cloudy face was full of anger. He raised his hand and waved. The two slaves around him quickly withdrew to deal with the fighting beast and see what was going on over there. Seeing the two big slave owners of Red Star City and Snowfield City lose face, the Baishar City Lord had long had a face full of vegetables. The slave owners of several other cities were gloating in their hearts. "You deserve it. Who told you to blindly show off?" However, they did not show off for long. Soon, a series of beast roars sounded, not only from the bull of Red Star City and the fighting beast of Snowfield City, but also other cries. The roars of the beasts were getting more and more intense, louder and louder. The people here were all experienced people and knew a lot about fighting beasts. Even if they were not clear about their daily habits, they could feel the emotions expressed by the sound. At this moment, the continuous roars of the beasts were full of anger and irritation, as if they were going to turn the world upside down. Accompanied by the sound of impact, it was like the fighting beasts were hitting a stone wall. This was not a good thing. What's going on? This time, they could not sit still and no longer paid attention to the battlefield. Is it possible that there is a fight in the beast pen? Several of our city's beasts are over there. Hurry up and send someone over to see. Pay attention, even if you hurt others, you can't hurt the fighting beasts of our own city. The beast war is not over yet. All the big and small slave owners let the slaves around them check the situation. The Snowfield King looked at the already chaotic stands and took a deep breath. "Everyone be quiet." This roar successfully attracted the attention of the slave owners, and the noisy field suddenly quieted down. Seeing this, the Snowfield King was a little satisfied. Looking at the situation in the battlefield, he raised his hand and reluctantly said, "The fourth beast war is over, prepare for the fifth." As for the hooded man who could send out the enslavement fire, they would send someone to understand. In a hurry, it was better to stabilize the field. Inside the battlefield, two heavy doors opened. Originally, they thought that they would not be able to get out alive after entering. However, when they saw the heavy stone door slowly opening, they felt a kind of excitement. The three slaves took the lead and rushed out. The four people of the Feather Tribe and the Tianshan Tribe looked at the three people of the Flaming Horns Tribe and quickly walked out. Xiao watched the horned lizard beast being pulled out by nearly 20 sturdy high-level slaves with thick rattan ropes. The giant beast was also very happy to be able to leave this place, so it did not resist and was very cooperative. Since the beginning of the beast battle, even the fighting beasts that could get out of here were all injured and exhausted. It was rare to see such a fighting beast that almost maintained the same appearance as when it entered the arena. The only difference was that it was bleeding again. When the giant beast left, Xiao turned around and went to the other door with Lei and Tua. When they walked out of the door, Xiao quickly whispered to Lei and Tua, "Let Cha-Cha take you away later. It will soon be chaotic here, and no one will take care of us for the time being." Lei and Tua looked at Xiao in surprise. They did not quite understand the meaning of Xiao's words. However, since Xiao said so, they would do as he said. The scene on the battlefield not only surprised the slave owners, but also the two of them. They heard others speculating that Xiao was a slave owner, but they did not believe it. Xiao was a person who was favored by the shaman. He was also an elder of Yanjiao and was recognized by the ancestors. Whether he was a slave owner or not, Xiao was a Yanjiao person anyway. The roar of the beast, as well as the sound of impact, still showed no signs of stopping, but became more and more intense. At this time, in the large warehouse where the flame bull was locked, the flame bull was stomping the ground with its hooves. Damn it, where was the bug that annoyed the dead bull? How did it disappear into the ground? While it was stomping on the ground, the beetle that had driven the flame bull to the brink of insanity had silently drilled out from the corner. It then quickly flew towards the back of the flame bull, grabbed it firmly, and bit it. It even used its hook-like front claws to stab with all its might. The flame bull screamed again. Moo! Damn it, the bull was pissed off. Bang! The two thick horns on the swinging bull's head once again hit the stone wall next to it. Those stone walls could only block for a while, but they could not withstand the crazy collisions of the fighting beasts. After all, this was not the Colosseum. The people who were sent there to understand the situation listened to the fierce roar and impact, and did not dare to open the stone door so easily. Just as they were thinking about how to calm these fighting beasts down, they heard a bang somewhere. The stone wall of the tall building that had cost a huge amount of manpower and material resources, and had buried hundreds or even thousands of slaves, was finally knocked down. Around the collapsed stone wall, the people standing there saw that the flame bull's eyes had turned into a strange red color, and its big nostrils spurted out a burning breath. The slaves standing outside could clearly see the two white streams of air that were spurted out. A small slave owner and more than a dozen slaves rushed to appease the flame bull. When they saw this scene, they said at the same time, "Oh no! What happened in the end that made this bull so angry?" The flame bull had a characteristic. Their eyes would change color with emotion. When its eyes turned red, it meant that it was angry. The darker the color, the greater its anger. At this time, the flame bull's eyes had become almost blood red. It was like a red-hot stone, and whoever caught it would be scalded. This state was very suitable for the battlefield. However, this was not the battlefield, nor was it the time to fight. The flame bull's blood-red eyes looked at the people outside, and its hooves were digging on the ground. As soon as they saw this scene, the people of Red Star City were shocked. "It's going to attack. Go find the king. Quick!" This flame bull was enslaved by the king, and only the king could calm it down. If others wanted to stop it, they could only work together to kill it. But before that, the Red Star City Lord said not to hurt the flame bull, so the solution could only be to find the king. The flame bull let out a long cry, lowered its head, pointed its horns forward and rushed out. The main culprit who had angered the flame bull had already moved to another place and started the same thing again. There were many fighting beasts in the surroundings. The task that Xueqi had assigned to it before was to provoke the anger of the bull. 2 days before the opening of the Colosseum, Xueqi wandered around the Colosseum and heard about the flame bull of Red Star City. It had a 5-year winning streak and an irritable temper, which was in line with Xueqi's plan. In order to see the beetle's obedience and ability to execute, Xueqi also specifically checked it. That day, he had been locked in the house, only occasionally going out to pick up something and then returning to the house again to examine the beetle. He gave the beetle a small piece of a very ordinary branch and let it take it to the ground near the corner outside the house. The beetle also completed the task very well, 3 times in a row, which made Xueqi begin to rejoice in enslaving such a beetle. He said to Sapphire that after this matter was over, he would unlock the second lock. In fact, after Xueqi determined its ability, he also wanted to unlock the second lock, but the time from the first lock was too short. According to Xueqi, if the time interval between the 2 unlocks of the slaves was too short, it may not be good. There were even cases of death. Therefore, Xueqi did not immediately unlock it, but promised to unlock it later. In fact, in addition to the big blue beetle, there were also a large number of beetles in the other places where the fighting beasts were locked. Although they did not pose any threat individually, once the number increased, it would be different. This was also the reason why the other fighting beasts began to be anxious and angry. The Colosseum would be open for 2 to 3 days before and after the full moon, and there were about 10 battles every day. Most of the fighting beasts that appeared in these battles were locked up in the place next to the Colosseum. After all, there may be some small changes before the fighting beasts. Therefore, it was not only the fighting beasts that appeared on the first day, but also the ones that appeared on the second day. And now, these battle beasts that were finally pacified and locked up to prepare for battle were all going crazy. At first, it was only 1 or 2, but soon it was like a chain reaction, driving the mood of the other fighting beasts. The fighting beasts, whose tempers were not very good, became even worse. What's more, this time there was a factor that ignited their anger. Boom! Another stone wall was knocked down. And this was also like a prelude. After this, a stone wall was knocked down and the stone door was knocked open. Under the rage of the fighting beasts, less than 10% of their rationality remained. The first to bear their anger, In addition to the slaves guarding this side, was the Colosseum. However, there were many protections in the Colosseum, and there were also high walls blocking them. They could not attack, so they turned to other directions, rampaging in the Beast City to vent their accumulated anger and murderous intent. The guards of the Beast City were composed of people from the 3 cities. It was impossible to say that they were absolutely harmonious. Coupled with the fact that the loopholes in the order were not very solid at the moment, they were instantly in a mess. The competition in the Colosseum could not be carried out because of the rioting fighting beasts outside. The slave owners, who were still emotional before, did not dare to leave at will. They could only stay here and wait for the king and the slaves to deal with the fighting beasts outside. It was not until the afternoon that the situation outside was barely stabilized. The frightened little slave owners who were hiding in the stands of the Colosseum were no longer in the mood to continue watching the fighting beasts. Under the escort of the slaves, they returned to their respective stations. Xiao Xian's group did not follow them to the Luoye city station. After Xueqi brought the message, they found a place to rest first. "Xian, are we not going to enter the Luoye city station?" Tuo asked. "Not for the time being," Xiao Xian said. "Why? Are you worried about the Luoye city king's suspicion?" "More than that, I'm worried that something big will happen. If it really happens, it's a good opportunity to leave." Xiao Xian looked at the full moon in the sky and said. Chapter 333. The effect of the closed fighting beasts was more intense than Xiao Xian expected. One was that Xiao Xian underestimated the ability of the sapphire, and the other was the weather. When the moon was full, it was the time when the beasts were most prone to riot. However, the slave owners liked to see the furious beasts fighting each other. For them, only in such a situation, the battle was fierce enough and good enough to watch. He just didn't know, after experiencing the collective riot of the fighting beasts, when they went to the Beast City again, would there be a psychological shadow? Xiao Xian stood on the high sand ridge, looking at the distant Luoye city station, and the Beast City further away. This night, Lei and Tuo had a rare good sleep. During the time of being caught, they had been on guard, nervous, and always on guard. Until now, with Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha, they were finally relaxed. Sleeping well could restore them quickly. After midnight, Xiao Xian saw a bird flying into Luoye City. Not long after, a small group of people rushed to Luoye City. Looking at their almost silent but fast running, Xiao Xian guessed that these people were sent by the Luoye City king to investigate the news. Something must have happened to make these people rush back in such a hurry. The next day, Xiao Xian went to find Xueqi alone. He did not take Lei and Tuo with him, letting them find a place to rest and recuperate. He first determined whether there was someone chasing the 3 of them. In particular, Dao Yu. Xiao Xian showed his hand in the Colosseum. Even if other people did not care, Dao Yu would certainly have an idea. In such a time when there might be a more intense storm, it was always good to be careful. However, what Xiao Xian did not expect was that he learned a surprising news from Xueqi. The Baisher King is dead? Well, someone came to report last night. Father asked me not to leave the station, and would leave here as soon as possible. Xueqi was a little tired. At first, he was curious as to how Xiao Xian was able to create the enslavement fire. However, under such circumstances, a tribesman was relatively unimportant. What's more, Xueqi now needed Xiao Xian's help. Naturally, it was impossible to push him too hard. Xiao Xian pondered over Xueqi's words. The Baisher city lord, the king of that city, was actually killed? Yesterday, he was still angry in the beast fighting arena. How did he get slaughtered when he returned? Do you know who killed him? Xiao Xian asked. Xueqi shook his head. I don't know. How about Dao Yu? Xiao Xian asked again. I don't know, but I heard that one of the Baisher king's 3 close guards died. After a pause, Xueqi added, it seems that the one who died was not Dao Yu. After the riot in the beast fighting arena, another city lord was killed. This time, the beast fighting arena was doomed to not continue. At first, when he heard the news, the Snowfield King was still clamoring to investigate why the fighting beasts rioted and how the city lord was killed. However, in the afternoon, there was news that the Snowfield King had left with his people. In the original words of the Snowfield King, I have an urgent matter. Whoever wants to care about it, I don't care anyway. What happened in the end that could make the Snowfield King so anxious? Xiao Xian wondered. I heard that the snowfield city side seems to have lost a very important thing. Xueqi said. A very important thing? Xian asked. I don't know what it is. I'm still inquiring. However, it is said that it may be related to your tribe. Xueqi said. Xian's eyelids twitched. What were the hidden purposes of the other tribes? His previous guess was that they were looking for metal ores. Could it be that they had succeeded? The people of the Feather tribe and the Tianshan tribe who came back with them that day had already left overnight yesterday. They did not say hello to the people of Luoye City. Even if he wanted to ask, he could not find anyone. If it's really related to your tribe, then you have to avoid it early. Our Luoye City has taken in a lot of tribes. Xueqi said. Things were the same as what Xueqi said. In the afternoon, near dusk, the Luoye City king gathered his people and left with everyone. There was no one left in the station. Originally, Xian wanted to let Cha leave with Lei and Tua first, but Xueqi took the initiative to let Lei and Tua go with them. In the 2 days before and after the full moon, the desert was very dangerous, so it was better to be careful. Xian thought about it and agreed. On the day they left the beast-fighting desert, the Luoye City king saw the 3 of them and did not say a word. As for Baishur City, after their king was killed, the young masters of Baishur City and the small slave owners left with their slaves. It was too dangerous here, so it was better to go back to the city first and then fight for the throne. Not only Baishur City and Luoye City, but people from several other cities also left one after another. They seemed to be aware of the coming storm and left in a hurry. The people of several cities left, leaving only the original guards of Beast City. The guards of the 3 cities were already on guard against each other. A snowfield city guard left here went out to release water at night. The desert at night was bright because of the moon in the sky. The guard went to a beast fighting pit. There were a lot of beast corpses piled up in the pit. Most of them were the losers of the beast fighting war in the past 2 days. If it was in the past, these corpses would have been given to the slaves to eat. But now they had all withdrawn, leaving too many corpses behind. They were all thrown in a beast-fighting pit. After another 10 days, only the bones would be left. There were scavenger birds and other insects around, which would digest these corpses. Yawning, the guard looked around. Except for his own companions not far away, he did not find other people from other cities. This made him feel relieved and he planned to urinate. Just as he was about to urinate, he suddenly heard some fine sounds. He quickly looked around and found no other abnormalities. Then he listened carefully. Those sounds were coming from under the beast-fighting pit. Could it be that there were still beasts in the pit that had not died? Thinking of the riot in the beast-fighting pit, the guard swallowed his saliva. He held the handle of his knife and stretched his neck to look inside. Then, he saw some black beetles coming out from under the beast-fighting pit. One by one, they quickly wrapped up the corpses of the beasts piled up at the top. If that was all, the guard found that the corpses of the beasts in the pit were quickly thinning. The originally strong muscles became dry at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even if he had seen the scavengers in the desert quickly eliminate the corpses, it was also caused by the joint action of many birds and other animals of all sizes. But now, in this pit, there was only one kind of beetle. They were frantically gnawing, and the black armor on their backs reflected the cold white light of the moon. He had guarded the beast-fighting pit for so many years and had never seen such a scene. According to the previous years, such a large number of beast corpses would take about 10 days. But looking at the current situation, it would take less than 10 days. There was no need to wait for the sun to come out tomorrow. These beast corpses would be eliminated and only hard bones and thick scales would be left. The guard standing outside the pit had cold sweat on his back. He felt that his scalp was frozen. He shouted and ran to his companions to talk about what was happening in the beast-fighting pit. Insects? You mean those little beetles? It can't be, right? Some people doubted. It's true. If you don't believe me, go and see. The other guards were puzzled and planned to team up to see. They were really frightened by recent events. 1 or 2 of them did not dare to run around. However, when they went to see in a group, there were no more black beetles in the pit. Not a single one could be seen. However, the corpses of the beasts had obvious signs of being gnawed and shriveled. How come they're gone? They were just here. The guard walked around the pit, looking for them but did not find any. Under the sand, a group of beetles that had just gnawed on the corpses of the beasts had left, following a big blue beetle and leaving the beast-fighting pit. The next day, When the sun rose, only a few seemingly harmless beetles were left in the beast fighting pit. Most of them had disappeared. Chapter 334. The Snowfield King, who left the Beast City behind, took his people and rushed back to Snowfield City overnight. Standing in the secret underground palace, the Snowfield King's eyes widened as he looked at the small open space under his feet. Originally, the things that should have been placed here were gone. Staring at the palm-sized pit under his feet, the Snowfield King's bloodshot eyes looked like the angry flame bull of Red Star City. The fists hanging on the side of his body were clenched. His whole body was full of terrible hostility, making the people behind the Snowfield King not dare to breathe. After a while, the Snowfield King gritted his teeth and said, "No matter who it is, no matter how many people are involved, I want them all to die." After leaving the underground palace, the Snowfield King issued a kill order. If you meet a tribesman, kill. Kill one and you'll be rewarded. Kill two and you'll be promoted. The more you kill, the more rewards you'll get. At the same time, the Snowfield King was still investigating who stole the treasure. He had always looked down on the tribesmen. Therefore, although his men said that there were traces of tribesmen's activities, he still thought that there must be other people involved, such as the people from the other two cities, or other restless small cities. It was not only the Snowfield City that was brewing a storm that was about to unfold, but also Luoya City. Xiao and the other two followed Xueqi back to Luoya City. Before entering the city, they found that the city's defense had been raised by a level. The whole place was filled with a solemn and uneasy atmosphere. After entering the city, this feeling was even more intense. Even the two royal sisters in the city, who were usually arrogant, stayed in their own residence. There were slaves guarding outside the house day and night. As soon as Luoya City's King Su Luan returned to the city, he called his 3 sons over and scolded them. The general meaning was, "Now is a special time. I don't care how you usually fight, but now you should settle down. Whoever dislikes having long arms and legs, I don't mind personally chopping them." Xueqi's 3 brothers did not doubt Su Luan's words. Su Luan really didn't care about the feelings between father and son. There were many beautiful women around him, and there were many lovers in other tribes. If he really wanted to have descendants, he would let them live again. Xueqi's 3 brothers were clear about this. Usually, they were muddle-headed, but now they had to stay awake. After Xiao and the other two entered the city, they returned to the tribal area of Luoya City. In the past, even if other tribesmen went out, there would still be people in this place. But now, not a single person could be seen. The doors and windows were tightly shut, and there was no sound at all. Could it be that they went back early? "Didn't you say that we would leave together after everyone came back?" Ray was dissatisfied. He was very unhappy that those people had abandoned the 3 of them and left. No, even if the traveling team leaves, there will always be someone to stay behind. Tuo frowned as he looked at the situation in front of him, feeling more and more uneasy. Xiao pointed at the empty area and asked the person next to him, "Where are they?" Next to him was Xueqi's slave. Although his heart was very repulsed by Xiao and the other two, he still maintained a polite surface for Xueqi's sake. When he heard Xiao's question, he replied, "They left the day before yesterday." His tone was contemptuous and angry, as if those people had done something unforgivable. Xiao didn't care about the slave's tone. He opened the door and walked into their Yanjiao house. He found a piece of leaf with words by the window of the room, which was stuffed through the gap in the window. Looking at the handwriting, it was left by Huang Yi of the Mang tribe. There were 2 sentences written very briefly, meaning that the situation was urgent and they left first. If Xiao and the other 2 came back, they should also leave quickly. They actually left first, Ray said angrily. Tuo was a lot calmer. He never expected other tribesmen to have the same attitude as his own tribe. Just as Xiao looked at the leaf, Cha-Cha outside also called out, and then came over with a feather. This feather was inserted on the roof of the house where Xiao and the others were. Cha-Cha could recognize the other party from the smell of this feather. "Is this the feather of the Hui tribe's mountain eagle?" Xiao took the feather and found that there were also words left on the feather. The words above were, "Leave as soon as possible." The Mang tribe and the Hui tribe both left such words. No matter what happened, no matter what serious situation those people made, it was most important to leave immediately. The slave sent by Xueqi had been sent away by Xiao, So now there were only 3 of them in the room. When they came in, Xiao Xian found that the people in the city were very wary of them. Near this house, he didn't know how many pairs of eyes were staring at them. The reason why they hadn't started yet was probably because of Su Gu. If they wanted to leave without permission, it would probably be difficult. There may be something big happening in this desert. It's not something we can get involved in. You leave first. Xiao Xian said to Lei and Tuo. What about you? Tuo asked. I will stay here for a few days. You go first and let Cha-Cha take you away. Xiao Xian said. This won't do. It's too dangerous for you to stay here alone. Lei and Tuo were unwilling. In the tribe, Xiao Xian was valued. They knew in their hearts that Xiao Xian was still an elder. How could they leave the elder here and let the 2 of them run away first? Xiao Xian did not immediately answer. He rolled up his sleeves and mobilized his totem power. The flame pattern extended from his shoulders, over his elbows, over his forearms, and then rushed over his wrists. Lei and Tuo's faces were sluggish. Their mouths opened twice before they said, Xian, you've improved. Tuo recalled, before the Colosseum, you've already improved, right? No wonder I felt that your momentum was different at that time. At that time, Tuo's attention was more on the giant beast. When he stared at Xiao Xian, he did not pay attention to Xiao Xian's momentum. At that time, Xiao Xian wore long sleeves that covered his wrists. They did not see the totem pattern on Xiao Xian's wrists. Even so, it's too dangerous for you. The other tribes followed several senior totem warriors and ran away. How can you stay here safely? Tuo and Lei were still not at ease. Su Gu sighed. I still need to help him. I'll leave you here so you can leave. Moreover, you're still injured. Xiao Xian said. Thinking of their current situation, Lei and Tuo were somewhat discouraged. Otherwise, we'll leave first and wait for you on the road. When we came here before, didn't we pass through a rocky area? We'll rest there and wait in that place. 10 days. Xiao Xian looked at Lei and Tuo. If you wait for 10 days and I still don't appear, then leave first. Tuo and Lei still wanted to say something, but were stopped by Xiao Xian. In addition, I also plan to go to Baishur City to take a look. Taking advantage of the chaos there, I'll find a chance to deal with the traitor Dao Yu. With such a threat, Xiao Xian did not dare to go back to the tribe with ease. He was familiar with the Wanshi tribe. In this upcoming big storm, he did not know what role Dao Yu would play. Dao Yu must die. Although Lei and Tuo were very reluctant, they still did it according to Xiao Xian's arrangement. Xiao Xian went to find Su Gu. Su Gu did not pay much attention to Lei and Tuo. The 2 could not help him, so he readily let them go. He recently planned to enslave another group of people, as long as Xiao Xian stayed. After Lei and Tuo were taken away by Cha-Cha, Su Gu went to find Xiao Xian. He wanted to enslave another group of slaves. After seeing Xiao Xian's enslavement fire, Su Gu also communicated with Xiao Xian. However, Xiao Xian had not yet enslaved people, and for the time being, he did not intend to enslave people. Su Gu was somewhat disappointed. He also wanted to see if Xiao Xian could successfully enslave people. This was a rare talent for the tribes. This person actually did not use it. Such a good talent. Su Gu thought. Xiao Xian did not tell Su Gu about his enslavement of the beetle. After assisting Su Gu to successfully enslave 20 people, he finally left. Su Gu was quite reluctant. I know that this time's matter actually has nothing to do with you Yanjiao people. However, I still want to remind you to be more careful. It is said that the Snowfield King has issued a kill order to the tribes, so that the people of Snowfield City, as long as they meet the tribes, will directly kill them. Isn't your Luoye city worried about the Snowfield King coming to kill you? You have taken in the tribes. Xiao Xian asked. Su Gu thought about his father's attitude. It seemed that he was not worried at all. Recently, his father's beautiful concubine had changed, and every day was very happy. Chapter 335. When Xiao Xian left Luoye City, the camel brought from the Rain tribe spontaneously followed Xiao Xian. Originally, Xiao Xian thought that the camel was reluctant to leave him, and knew that it was not good to stay in the city, so it wanted to follow him. However, after leaving Luoye City, Xiao Xian saw the camel shake its head and make an ong sound, as if it was saying bye-bye, and then went to other places. The direction was completely different from Xiao Xian, and it did not care about Xiao Xian at all. Xiao Xian stared at the camel's figure, quickly walked over, and untied its reins, leaving only a bag of water hanging around its neck. Xiao Xian had a water bottle and a stone that Xueqi gave him, so he left the other bag of water to Mud. Patting Mud's neck, Xiao Xian said, "Good luck, don't get eaten." There were also some wild camels in the desert. Xiao Xian had seen them several times when he went into the desert with the expedition team. They were all in groups, walking on the ridge. In the scorching desert, the view was somewhat distorted. Mud, who seemed to be in a good mood, raised its head slightly and made an ong-ong sound. It faced the wind and sand and slowly walked away, the tuft of long hair on its head fluttering in the wind. Xiao Xian saw the camel's figure disappear from his sight and sighed. He looked at the reins in his hand and put them into the bag. He pulled his clothes, which were almost the same color as the desert, and quickly walked in the direction of Baishar City. The reason why Whitestone City was called Whitestone City was because the place where it was located, there were a lot of white stones exposed in the desert. In the desert, few rocks could withstand the continuous blow of flying sand and stones. The rocks exposed to the surface of the ground showed a variety of strange shapes under such grinding. When he saw the many white stones in his field of vision, Xiao Xian knew that he was not far from Baishar City. Perhaps there were still people from Baishar City patrolling around, so he had to be careful. Xiao Xian learned from Xueqi that after the death of the Baishar City's lord, the Baishar City's young lord brought people back to Baishar City and began to fight for the throne. Now there was a civil war. What was the cause of Baishar's death? Who killed him? Ironically, after his death, his children did not put in much effort to investigate the cause of his death or find the real culprit. They only cared about fighting for the position of city lord. While Xiao Xian was on his way to Whitestone City, inside a stone house, Blade Praying Mantis's ashen face looked like it had shrunk. Not a single part of its exposed skin was intact. Its face was covered with wrinkles and all kinds of muscle necrosis injuries. It looked a little scary. Especially his left arm, which was wrapped in a thick cloth and emitted a very strong smell of herbs. His entire person looked extremely weak, as if he was suffering from a serious illness and was about to die. Wow Dao Yu once again spat out a mouthful of blood. Lying on the wooden bed covered with thick animal skin, he forced a smile as he looked at the person in front of him. Young lord. Seeing Dao Yu struggling to get up, the Baishar City's young lord, who often looked for Dao Yu to discuss things, hurriedly said, "No need to be so polite. Just lie down." His line of sight swept over Dao Yu's terrifying face. Not daring to stay for half a minute, the Baishar young lord resisted the disgust in his heart and still maintained an amiable expression. His face was worried, as if he was worried about Dao Yu's injury. That day, the Baishar king was killed. The white stone card that symbolized the king's identity was also lost. Dao Yu went to track the murderer. Although he did not find the murderer, he picked up the white stone card and handed it to the young lord. No one doubted that Dao Yu would kill the Baishar king. In their view, Dao Yu did not get any benefits from killing the Baishar king, nor did he have the ability. How powerful was the Baishar king? How could he be killed by a slave? Seeing Dao Yu chase the murderer and make himself look like a ghost, they knew that the murderer was not caught, but was poisoned. When he received the white stone card from Dao Yu, the young lord's heart was very happy. With this stone card, he would have more confidence in competing for the throne in the city. Looking at the weak person on the bed, if it was a normal day, the Baishar young lord would certainly not care much about him. First, Dao Yu's current appearance looked too scary. Moreover, Dao Yu now seemed to have been wasted. On the day he came back, he looked fine, but as the days passed, his condition became more and more serious. Fortunately, he hid it from others. Most people in Baishar City did not know about Dao Yu's condition. The Baishar king's 3 guards, one of them died, leaving only Dao Yu and another one. The 2 of them supported different young lords. Although he was only a slave, at his current level, he knew too many secrets and had too many subordinates. Before obtaining the throne, even the Baishar young lord had to think twice before making a move. Now, Baishar City was still divided. If the other party knew about Dao Yu's condition, they would certainly take the opportunity to make trouble. Therefore, the Baishar young lord concealed Dao Yu's condition. Dao Yu wanted to recuperate at home, so the Baishar young lord was happy to do so, as long as Dao Yu did not go out to meet people. Enduring a few words, the Baishar young lord really could not stand Dao Yu's festering face and the smell of medicine here. After learning what he wanted to know from Dao Yu's mouth, He hurriedly left on the pretext that he had something to deal with. When he left, the Baisha young lord was still thinking, as soon as he took the throne, he would execute this slave. After the Baisha young master left in a hurry, Dao Yu, who was lying weakly on the wooden bed, sneered and changed to a comfortable position on the animal skin. He then unwrapped the cloth that was wrapped around his hand. This arm had been covered with festering wounds. Many of the muscles were necrotic, and the festering places could even see the white bones, which was very scary. With some difficulty, he moved his hand. The sharp pain made Dao Yu tremble all over. However, Dao Yu did not care about this. Instead, his eyes showed expectation and irrepressible excitement. I didn't expect the core seed to be so powerful. Dao Yu's eyes were burning as he looked at the festering hand that was almost only left with the bones. Poison? That was a treasure. A treasure that made the world crazy. So many people wanted to get it, but he, Dao Yu, got it. Just as he was thinking about the stolen treasure, Dao Yu suddenly heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Who? His fierce eyes swept over, only to see a person in a cloak. As soon as he saw this person, the expression on Dao Yu's face suddenly changed. The fierce look in his eyes also converged, and his festering face changed expression. If his face was intact, he could also see a respectful expression. Completely without the previous weak appearance, Dao Yu turned over from the bed and knelt on one knee, bowing his head in salute. It looks like you've succeeded, the person in the cloak said faintly. This was a woman's voice. The sound was like the spring water flowing through, seeming to be cool. Yes. Dao Yu slightly raised his head to look at the person in the cloak. His words were cautious, that core seed, you take it yourself. The cloaked person did not care. Thank you, young lord. Dao Yu's eyes burst with joy. Xueqi also has a word for me to bring to you. If you can take down Baisha City will also belong to you. After a few simple words, the cloaked person left a bag of herbs and left silently. Dao Yu carefully held the bag of herbs and personally boiled it. He drank all of it, leaving no dregs behind. These would allow his injuries to heal faster. After drinking the medicine, he looked at the dark sky outside the window. Dao Yu called two people, whispered a few words, and then jumped out of the window. Chapter 336. Xueqi was in the Baisha Desert where Baisha City was located. He met two groups of people patrolling outside, but looking at their absent-minded appearance, he wanted to know the situation in Baisha City. Moreover, according to the information that Xueqi learned, in the past, the patrols outside Baisha City were much stricter than they were now. The patrolling people would not be in such a listless state. However, it was also understandable. For the slaves, Baisha City was now a very critical time. The death of the big slave owner meant that their biggest master was gone. Who would take over, who would become their next master? Everything was still uncertain. They were full of worries about the future development. Easily avoiding these absent-minded guards, Xueqi also paid attention to some creatures around, such as birds, small beasts, and so on. They could be another eye of the Baisha people. Who knew if there would be people enslaving insects in Baisha City? It was better to be careful. After arriving at a large rock, this rock looked like a mushroom with a large umbrella-like top. This was because during the sandstorm, large grains of sand scraped closer to the ground, slowly grinding away the parts of the rock that were close to the ground. That was why it looked like this. Hiding below, Xueqi temporarily did not have to worry about being discovered by the birds above. Near night, there were no people patrolling around. Going forward, he would soon reach Baisha City. Xueqi intended to take a rest first. Drinking some water to restore his physical strength, Xueqi thought about the plan to mix into Baisha City. As he was thinking, his brows wrinkled. He had been thinking about how to mix into Baisha City, but the premise was that Dao Yu was in Baisha City. But what if Dao Yu was not? What would he do in the city? Thinking about it, Xueqi cut a section of the reins from the camel. He intended to use this section of the rope to calculate the position of Dao Yu, but he did not know if it would be successful. After the divination was completed, Xueqi opened his eyes and looked at the knot in his hand. He read the conclusion above and compared it to distinguish the position. His fingers drew on the ground and finally determined the indicated position. However, this direction was not the direction of Whitestone City. No matter what, Xueqi decided to go and take a look. Fortunately, He had done a divination before sneaking into Baisha city. Otherwise, it would have been a waste of time. After changing directions, Xiao quickly headed in the direction indicated by the conclusion. Without Cha-Cha's help, Xiaoxian's speed in the desert slowed down, but it wasn't slow either. As they walked, Xiao discovered that they were already out of the White Rock Desert. At such a critical time in Baisha city, Dao Yu was not in the city. What was he doing running so far away? Xiao continued to move in that direction. He only rested for a short while during the night before continuing his search until he arrived at a certain place. This place looked no different from any other place in the desert. As far as the eye could see, there were sand dunes of varying heights. Even the relatively flat areas looked like the surface of a lake that had been disturbed by the wind. The wind here was slightly stronger, causing sand and dust to fly. Xiao looked at the mountain-like sand dunes in front of him and then looked around. He didn't see anything suspicious, but according to the conclusion, it should be around here. Did he have to continue moving forward? Not only because of the conclusion, Xiao also had a very strange feeling. He always felt that there should be something here. Continuing to move forward, climbing up the mountain-like sand dunes, the strange feeling in his heart became even more intense. In Xiao's mind, the shell wrapped in the fire flashed. Such a change made Xiao stop. Just as Xiao was puzzled, he suddenly heard a soft sound. Although it was the sound of the surrounding wind blowing the sand, after Xiao's upgrade, his hearing had also increased. He could distinguish other sounds from those noises. It was obviously not the sound of sand blowing. Xiao quickly lay down on the ground and pulled his hood up. He looked in the direction of the sound. The sound was very soft in the sand, like the sound of stones being moved. It was very careful, as if the person who made the sound was on guard against something. Xiao lay there patiently and stared in the direction of the sound. The surrounding sand blew against Xiao's body, quickly covering him in a layer. Soon, Xiao discovered that between the two sand dunes in front of him, there was a crack in the ground, and the sand was sinking in. The gap grew wider and wider until it was wide enough for one person to pass through. Only then did Xiao see a person quickly jump out from the gap. The person looked around cautiously, but didn't find anything. Only then did he wave downwards. Xiao saw a person come out from the crack. It seemed that someone was helping to deliver the person underground. However, after the reckless person was handed out, the crack in the ground closed. The person who came out first looked around, then dragged the reckless person into the distance. Xiao thought for a moment and walked along the ridge under the cover of the sand. Although he couldn't follow closely, he could at least see where the person went. The person walked a distance and went around to the back of a hill. Then, he dug a hole in the sand with his hands and pushed the person in. Before burying the person, he took off all the clothes of the person who was pushed into the hole and compared them with his own body. It seemed that he wanted to keep them for his own use. The man put away the clothes he had taken off and filled the hole with sand. He looked around before returning to where he had come from. Xiao watched as the person returned to the place where he came out. He pushed away the sand that had covered the hole and knocked on the stone slab. After the stone slab was moved away, the person said something to the person below and went down through the crack. The stone slab closed again, and everything returned to normal. The wind quickly carried the sand and covered the place, making it impossible to see anything unusual. Xiao remembered the place and came to the place where the person had just dug the hole to bury the person. He pushed away the sand and saw the buried person. Previously, the person was dragged face down, so Xiao couldn't see his appearance. He could only see that it was a person. Now, Xiao found that the person not only had a face, but also had many festering necrosis on his body. It looked very scary, and there were also traces of bleeding from his nostrils and other places. Xiao couldn't see how the person's injuries were caused. There were no tattoos on his face. If there were no festering wounds, he should be a tall and muscular man. In the desert, even if he was a low-level slave, he was still a good laborer. What was under that place? Xiao was very curious. If Dao Yu was here, what was his purpose? Xiao lurked around, waiting for an opportunity. Around noon the next day, the desert weather was hot. Xiao was still hiding behind the sand ridge. His body had been covered with a layer of sand. Not caring about the heat of the sand, Xiao stared at the other side. He heard a little movement. Soon, The place opened again and another person came out. It was not the one Xiao Xian saw last night, but he did the same thing. After the other person came out, he also dragged the person to the distance, intending to dig a hole to bury the person. Xiao Xian's sudden appearance startled him. Before he could make a sound, he was grabbed by the throat and his 2 arms were removed. Xiao Xian looked at the slave lines that appeared and disappeared on his body, and found that this person was a slave of Baisher. Chapter 337. Looking at the other person's frightened eyes, Xiao Xian whispered, "I'll ask you a few questions. Answer obediently." The other person nodded again and again. Xiao Xian loosened his grip on the other person's throat. Seeing the other person breathe a sigh of relief, he asked, "What is Dao Yu doing down there?" The other person suddenly looked up. Obviously, he did not expect Xiao Xian to directly mention Dao Yu's name. The fear in his eyes deepened. He was obviously very afraid of the name Dao Yu. Xiao Xian once again grabbed the other person's throat, as if to directly break it. The man nodded and shook his head, as if he had something to say, but could not make a sound. When Xiao Xian released him again, he coughed non-stop. "Speak. Here, die." The man's frightened eyes suddenly dissipated, leaving only a murderous look. He took a step back, twisted his body, and swept his leg like a whirlwind toward Xiao Xian. At the front of his leg, his toe was clamped with a sharpened bone. If it was cut, he did not know how much blood he would lose. However, Xiao Xian had long been prepared. He did not move forward, only his hand moved. A wooden thorn pierced the other person's neck. This was something Xiao Xian found in the desert. It was a kind of tree with hard thorns all over. The thorns also had a certain hardness. Xiao Xian also smeared poison on the thorns. The person who was stabbed would be like a deep drunk and then fall asleep. After the man fell, Xiao Xian added a knife and buried him. Then he came to the place where the man had just come out. Following the man's practice last night, he brushed aside the sand and buckled the slate there. The slate opened a gap, and the person inside looked outside, but did not see anyone. He doubtfully opened the slate a little more and stretched his head to look outside. As soon as he exposed his head, he felt a sudden pain in his neck and his vision quickly blurred. After the man fell, Xiao Xian waited for a while. When he didn't hear any movement from below, he went down through the open crack and helped the unconscious man to sit down. He made a pose for him to look as if he had fallen asleep. Xiao Xian pulled the stone slab close and looked at the lock behind it. He also saw a polished stone stick next to it. Xiao Xian picked up the stone stick and stuck it there. This way, he could prevent people from outside from pulling the stone slab and coming in. After the stone slab was pulled up, the passage below was completely dark. There was a torch nearby, but Xiao Xian didn't need it. The passageway was nearly 2 meters high and less than 1 meter wide. Xiao Xian listened to the movements in the passageway and walked forward. The dark environment was not much of a problem for him. He just needed to change his field of vision. They walked until they reached a fork in the road, where there were 3 branching paths. Xiao Xian intuitively chose one. The deeper he went, the brighter the shell wrapped in totemic flames in Xiao Xian's mind. But at the same time, Xiao Xian also had a very uncomfortable feeling. Every nerve in his body was screaming for danger. This danger did not come from people, but from other reasons. The deeper he went, the wider the passageway became. There was wind flowing in the passageway, which proved that there should be other exits. This place didn't look like it had just been built. It looked like it had been built for a long time. Moving forward, Xiao Xian found that there were many warehouses here. There were people guarding the warehouses with a torch. 3 people were sitting on the ground next to the torch. However, looking at their slightly lowered chin, they were all dozing off. Xiao Xian sneaked into one of the warehouses. The 3 people guarding outside did not notice. The warehouse had no door to block it. There were many stones of different sizes inside, and the quality of the stones was not bad. They were at least mid-upper grade. Xiao Xian's first thought was that this was the place where Baisher City stored stones to make stoneware. But thinking about it, it didn't make sense. There was no need to hide the stones so far away. They hid it so well, as if they had other plans. At this moment, Xiao Xian heard a noise outside. He hid behind a few stones, and then observed the situation outside through the gaps of the stones. A group of people came in from outside, holding torches to illuminate the inside. "Hurry, hurry, hurry, move a few more," someone said. "Move more? There are already a lot of stones there." "Swordmaster told us to move, so let's move quickly. He's watching over there." The sound of stones being moved came from one of the warehouses outside. Someone said in a low voice, "I heard that a few more died. Their bodies are all rotten." "Hiss. Do you think we'll become like them? But as long as we survive these few days, we'll be able to improve." This is what Swordmaster promised. He will tell young master. Those people moved the stones and gradually left. It was dark outside again. The 3 guards outside talked for a while. One of them went to urinate and left temporarily. This was the place where the stones were placed, so they didn't dare to scatter them here. Of the remaining 2 guards, one yawned and continued to sleep. His spirit was particularly bad recently, while the other looked at his companion who was sitting on the ground and dozing off. The skin on his face began to fester, and his heart became more and more afraid. He knew in his heart that his companion would not last long. Just when he was upset, he suddenly heard the sound of stones falling. Startled, he went over to look but didn't see anything. He returned to his original place and continued to think. Xueqi had come out of the warehouse and quickly left. The sound of the stones falling to the ground was made by him. Xueqi remembered the direction of the people who moved the stones and went directly there. The sense of danger was getting stronger and stronger, which may be related to the cause of those people. What was hidden here? Was the swordmaster in those people's words Dao Yu? Just as Xueqi continued to sneak in, Dao Yu looked at the small thing not far away, his eyes fanatical. Around Dao Yu, there were many large and small stones piled up. The stones were at least medium. This place was originally built by the Baishur city's former Baishur king to hide gems and also as a cemetery after his death. In order to build such a palace-like cemetery, hundreds of slaves died. The remaining slaves were all killed after the underground palace was built. Therefore very few people knew about this place. Only the Baishur king who took over could know about it. Others, even if they knew that there was such a place, did not know the exact location. Later, the dead former Baishur king opened this place again and threw his deceased ancestors' bones and coffin into the corner. He also turned this underground palace into a place to hide stones. Because he knew a secret that the 3 major cities had been hiding. He also thought that one day, he could steal things from the 3 major cities. Unfortunately, before the former Baishur king could implement his ambitions, he was killed by a partnership. Probably, he never thought that the one who finally picked up the bargain would be the slave who followed him. There was more than one traitor. Of the 3 close guards, 2 betrayed and the only loyal one had been killed. Dao Yu looked at the thing that was not much bigger than a fist. It was the core seed that the Baishur king had been thinking about. With the help of Xueqi, he stole it from the snowfield city when the tribesmen were causing trouble. Being allowed to leave the core seed, he was really ecstatic. The shiny weapons used by the 3 major cities, such as the armor and weapons used by the snowfield's young master that day, came from the core seed. The core seed could turn stones into ores, and then extract the needed things from these ores. These were all his in the future. This was Dao Yu's underground palace alone. Was he afraid of the Yanjiao tribe's revenge? At first, when he heard the news of the Yanjiao tribe, he was naturally worried. But with the enhancement of his strength, with more and more things in his hands, and knowing some secrets about the tribe's fire seed, he could not see the tribesmen. The slave owners would be the future overlords. And he, Dao Yu, would also try his best to become a slave owner. Thinking that Xueqi had such an ability, Dao Yu's mood suddenly became hazy, but soon became happy again. With Baishur City and the core seed, he did not have to be afraid. If he really could not solve the difficulties, he could still go to Xueqi. There was a cleansing in the desert. After this cleansing was over, there may be no 3 major cities. As for how many other cities could exist, Dao Yu did not know. However, Luoya City may continue to exist, and the Baishur City that Dao Yu took over. No, it could not be called Baishur City in the future. It had to be changed. Dao Yu, who was fantasizing about a better future, did not know that the most unpleasant person was coming to his side. Chapter 338. Dao Yu piled up the stones around the core seed, leaving only a narrow aisle to go directly to the core seed. At this time, Dao Yu was standing in this aisle. The others did not quite understand the use of these stones, nor did they know what the one in the middle was. Only in Dao Yu's vague explanation, they knew that it was a dangerous thing. They did not recognize the value of the core seed, so they were not willing to approach it. Looking at the increasing number of stones piled up here, Dao Yu's face became more and more happy. Looking down at his palm, the original deep bone injury, after drinking the medicine, had been a lot better. His own recovery ability was also strong. The skin and flesh of the injury had regenerated. After 2 days, it would grow well. If it was another 5 or 6 days, it would certainly be completely healed. Well, this is it for the time being, Dao Yu said to the people who carried the stones. At first, there were 50 slaves sent here by Dao Yu, but after a few days, there were only 30 people left. Especially in these 2 days, there were a lot of deaths. Hearing Dao Yu's words, the other people's hearts relaxed. The work here was finally done. The task was completed and they were waiting for the reward. Dao Yu called the people in the underground palace to come here and took out a pottery jar. After opening it, they could smell a burst of wine. For the slightly lower-level slaves, wine was a luxury and could not be tasted often. For the lower levels, they may not be able to taste it in their lifetime. After smelling the wine, some people swallowed hard, their eyes staring straight at the jar in Dao Yu's hand, envious. It was said that only high-level slaves and slave owners could often drink it. Regardless of whether it was good or not, this was at least a symbol of identity. Looking at it made people's hearts itch unbearably. Dao Yu took in the other people's expressions and smiled. Well, are you all here? Should be. Someone said, somewhat impatiently. Dao Yu looked at the people who had gathered, counted them, and asked what happened to the missing people. He knew who had been dragged out, but after counting, there were still 2 people missing. One was the person who dragged the body out and did not come back, and the other was the guard at the exit. Would you like me to go over there and look? Someone said. Dao Yu thought for a moment and shook his head. Forget it. Don't worry about them. Let's drink first. It's been hard on everyone these days. I specially asked for a jar of wine from the young master for everyone to drink. Hearing Dao Yu's words, the other people's hearts were also happy. Although they were very afraid of Dao Yu and even called him Blade Master, now that they heard Dao Yu's words, they couldn't help but feel relieved. The fear of the past few days also dissipated a lot. As for the 2 who didn't come, none of them wanted to leave. If they didn't get any benefits after leaving, it would be a huge loss. Dao Yu lifted the wine jar and took a sip himself. After drinking, he smacked his lips as if he was savoring the aftertaste, making the others envious. After taking the first sip, Dao Yu immediately handed the jar to the people next to him. Everyone, have a sip. There were not so many cups here. For the slaves, there was not so much attention. Usually, everyone shared the food like this. Therefore, after Dao Yu handed out the wine jar, the people who took it directly took the jar and poured it. The others could not wait to come and grab it. The slave who took the wine had just taken a sip, but before he could taste it carefully, the wine jar was taken away. If it weren't for Dao Yu standing here, these people might really fight over this jar of wine. Dao Yu looked at the slaves who were grabbing the wine jar, while making a sound to stop them from robbing, ensuring that everyone drank at least a sip. No one noticed that Dao Yu's eyes flashed fiercely and viciously. Snap! The wine jar that had been drunk was smashed to the ground. The slave holding the jar covered his throat, making a sound. Blood flowed from his mouth, and his legs seemed to not listen to him. Soft, he staggered a few steps and fell to the ground. One by one, the slaves fell down. Some people reacted to the wine they had just drunk, but it was already too late. Dao Yu quietly stood next to them, watching them fall down one by one. His breathing stopped. A slave who was vomiting blood crawled toward Dao Yu, his eyes full of unwillingness. It seemed that he wanted to drag Dao Yu to hell together. Unfortunately, his arm had not yet touched Dao Yu's foot when it powerlessly hung down, no longer making a sound. Dao Yu contemptuously laughed and kicked. Seeing that the person did not respond, he should have already stopped breathing. However, he was not at ease. The poisoned people fell to the ground one by one in the chest, crushing their sternum. After determining that there was no possibility of survival, he went to the exit. There should be a guard who had not come over, and it seemed that there was also a slave? In short, they all had to die. He would not let go of anyone who knew the secret here. Even the birds that he rode from Baishar City stopped in one place. After sending the birds back, He walked over on foot and did not let the birds follow him. Before, Dao Yu had selected these slaves and sent them over, but only to repair the underground palace and carry the stones. Dao Yu himself did not want to risk his life to be in close contact with the core seed every day. He would die. When he stole the core seed, one of his arms was almost wasted. Naturally, he did not want to try a second time. Since he did not want to die, then let others die. Now that these projects had been initially completed, there was no need for those slaves to survive. If there was a need in the future, he could send a group of people over. There were many slaves in the desert, especially now in this chaotic time. Dao Yu did not care about the life and death of these slaves. Although Dao Yu himself was a slave, he did not look at the other slaves. When Dao Yu went to the exit, Xueqi came out from the dark and looked at the 30 people on the ground who had no breath. He thought, Dao Yu was really ruthless enough. Looking away from the people on the ground, Xueqi walked over to the core seed. There were some glowing crystals around, but there was no flame. He did not know if it was an illusion, but Xueqi always felt that the crystals here were much brighter than in other places. Even if it was the same kind of glowing crystal, the one placed here was better. Feeling the danger signals from every cell in his body, Xueqi looked at the small metal object in the middle of the pile of stones. Dao Yu was hiding it like this, so it must be a very special thing. Xueqi's heart moved. Was it related to the metal? The closer he got, the more Xueqi could feel the burning tingling in his arms, face and other places. No, not every part of his body could feel the pain. Xueqi took off his outer layer of clothing, revealing the worm skin clothing he was wearing. It was the skin of the big worm that he had picked up when he went to Eagle Mountain with Cha-Cha. At this time, there was no pain in the places covered by this worm skin. Thinking of something, Xueqi quickly took off the worm skin he was wearing. No matter what, he would take this thing and not leave it to Dao Yu. Quickly rushing over, Xueqi wrapped the small metallic object with his insect skin coat. He wrapped it around a few times so not a single seam was exposed. Sure enough, the tingling feeling quickly disappeared. After wrapping it, Xueqi put the thing in the animal skin bag and hid it close to his body. Since the worm skin had been well isolated from this crisis, there was no danger in keeping it close. After hiding it, Xueqi jumped lightly and turned over to hide behind a big stone. A few seconds after Xueqi hid, Dao Yu rushed over like the wind. When he arrived at the exit, he wanted to kill the sleeping slave. However, he found that there was something wrong with the man. Taking a closer look, Dao Yu's heart was even more suspicious. The slave didn't seem to be too tired and fell asleep. It was more like a trick. Moreover, Dao Yu also felt the disappearance of the core seed. Within the range of this underground palace, the threat of the core seed could naturally be felt. When this threat suddenly disappeared, it must be that something had happened to the core seed. After killing the slave, Dao Yu rushed back to take a look. Sure enough, the place where the core seed was originally placed was empty, and there was no shadow around. Dao Yu glared, incredulously looking at the empty place. The blue veins on his forehead violently jumped, his eyes red, and he issued an angry roar. Under the rage, Dao Yu did not care about anything else. Venting his anger, he slapped a stone pillar that supported the underground palace. The place where he hit suddenly appeared with a clear palm print. At the same time, the pillar body also cracked with a clear crack. The whole underground palace shook, and stone chips and dust constantly fell from the top. Chapter 339. Dao Yu was trembling with anger, his whole body twitching slightly. One was the pain. After all, his injuries had not been completely healed. However, the most important thing was the anger that was rising in his body. Compared to the anger of losing the core seed, the pain was naturally not a big deal. There was no one else here, only Xueqi and Dao Yu. The more Dao Yu was like this, the more Xueqi was convinced of the preciousness of the thing that he had just obtained. He was determined to keep it well, to give it to anyone but Dao Yu. Xueqi could hear Dao Yu's rough breathing, like a raging flame bull. Just as Xueqi was about to go out and clean up the house, he felt a change. There seemed to be some invisible energy rioting around, and it was Dao Yu who was standing there. This kind of rioting power made Xueqi feel very bad. Looking through the gap between the stones, Xueqi saw Dao Yu's appearance at this time. Dao Yu's coat had been broken, and he could see countless fine lines from his head to his torso and arms, just like his meridians. These fine lines still extended, covering Dao Yu's body. Not only that, but these fine lines were also like his meridians, sometimes thick and sometimes thin. Dao Yu felt that such a change was a good thing. He could feel the power flowing in his meridians, his body was strengthening, and changing in a good direction. Only at this moment, Dao Yu did not have too much thought to feel such a change. He was still in the rage of losing the core seed, and the anger made his thinking not so clear. For a moment, he did not think deeply about the results and significance of such a change. What surprised Xiao was that there was a chain-like pattern on Dao Yu's neck, which was the slave pattern of Baishar City. After unlocking the high-level slaves, the slave pattern on their body would also change, not as much as the low-level slaves. At this moment, Xiao felt that the chain on Dao Yu's neck seemed to be tightened, and the bulging muscles made Dao Yu's whole person look like he had swelled up a circle. Dao Yu's change continued, and the airflow around his body was surging wildly. With a roar, the chains were tightened and tightened again. Almost all the bones in Dao Yu's body, such as his sternum, spine, limbs, knees, elbows and so on, were making a ringing sound, like a rattlesnake shaking its tail. On the other hand, Dao Yu's seriously injured arm was rapidly recovering, as if reborn. His heart became even stronger, and the blood in the meridians in his neck flowed rapidly. His muscles seemed to expand in rhythm with his heartbeat, protruding outwards. Suddenly, Xiao heard a bang sound, as if a chain had been broken. At the same time, the chain pattern on Dao Yu's neck was really broken, and like melting, it gradually dissipated and disappeared. The corners of Xiao's eyes twitched, and he couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. He once asked Xueqi, could the enslaved slaves break free from that kind of shackles? Xueqi said that it was possible, but the probability was very low. To be able to do it to that extent, one must be a genius character. Not only was his talent extremely high, but there was also a certain amount of luck. That was not something that anyone could do, not even 1 in 10,000. Now, there was such a person in front of Xiao, and he did it. In Xiao's mind, there was a fire that did not belong to the slaves. It was not the totem flame of Yanjiao, nor was it the dual-colored flame of the slave owners. In any case, this was an independent flame, out of the scope of the slaves. This was the reflection of Dao Yu's source of power at this time. At this moment, Dao Yu was like a glaring azura, with the power of a demon. The power fluctuations that broke out made Xiao's face become unusually dignified. Boom! Dao Yu punched the side of the stone pillar, his eyes with a destructive madness, as if he had lost his mind. The underground palace shook even more, and the stones fell with the dust. It couldn't go on like this. Xiao instantly mobilized the power of the totem to the peak. The totem flame in his mind violently rolled, and his blood seemed to boil with the appearance of the totem pattern. His whole body's momentum was like a surging river, resolutely moving forward. It seemed that even if he was facing a thick wall, he would break it hard. Compared to Dao Yu, who had just broken through the shackles, it was not weak. So what if Dao Yu broke through the shackles? He would still kill him. Almost at the moment when Xiao rushed out, Dao Yu's madness shifted the target. From the side of the stone pillar, he moved to Xiao's body. His eyes locked on Xiao's body. At this moment, in Dao Yu's vision, the surrounding stones, corpses, and even the whole underground palace had all retreated. As far as his line of sight, there was only Xiao left, the person who stole the core seed and broke his dream. Seeing Xiao rushing over, Dao Yu did not avoid it. His body flashed, directly facing Xiao. When he jumped up, the stone slab under his feet could not withstand the sudden impact. It cracked into pieces of different sizes, and the stone chips rose like a mist. The dense fist shadows intertwined, and the air seemed to be compressed by a heavy hammer. The shock ripples visible to the naked eye spread out layer by layer, shaking off the stone chips and dust that fell from the top. In a face-to-face encounter, it was unknown how many times they had fought. Waiting for him to fall from the air, Xiao rushed up, rushing straight to Dao Yu. The surrounding airflow seemed to be driven by Xiao, pressing toward Dao Yu. The fist had yet to arrive, but the oppressive air, which was like an army passing through, had already rolled over, clearly showing the power contained in it. In the face of Xiao's attack, Dao Yu, with absolute confidence, did not avoid it. His ankle once again suddenly rotated to meet the attack, and the ground cracked into pieces of stone slabs shattered. In Dao Yu's mind, as long as he broke through the shackles, he would reach a height that others could hardly reach. It was just a tribal kid. Even if this person had been promoted, it was still not as powerful as his own breakthrough. After he became a senior slave, he had also killed tribesmen. In his opinion, although the tribesmen had some strange abilities, they were nothing special. Especially after he learned about the secret of the tribe's fire seed, he looked down on them even more. Kill. He wanted to kill the person who stole the core seed. In the air, there was a series of roaring sounds, like rolling thunder, like the beating of war drums. Every blow contained the determination to kill. If ordinary people were in the face of such an offensive, they would definitely be blown into slag. In this underground palace under the desert, only the roaring sound was left. Other sounds seemed extremely weak in such a roaring sound. The broken stone slabs were getting smaller and smaller, and the stone chips and dust that were shaken up were like smoke all around. Xueqi felt as if he had returned to the original mountain forest full of mystery and crisis, the situation of the battle with the ferocious beasts. In the face of the ferocious beasts, a slight negligence and a weak momentum could cause an irreparable situation. At this moment, it was the same. What's more, it was facing a traitor of the tribe like Dao Yu. Can't retreat, can't be weak. If the other party's attack was strong, he would be stronger. If the other party was fierce, he would be fiercer. If the other party wanted to fight, he would fight even harder. Xueqi's totem patterns began to brighten, like a flame cast. Just like when he exposed the blue flame in the Colosseum, it seemed to burn people. Boom! Dao Yu suffered a heavy punch. After the punch hit, Xueqi did not stop. Followed by a fist shadow that could not be seen by the naked eye, it once again bombarded Dao Yu's chest. Dao Yu, who had been punched twice in succession, was in a sorry state. He flipped upside down in the air and fell heavily to the ground, continuing to slide back for a while before stopping. Xueqi wanted to continue a few more times, only to find that on Dao Yu's body, those vein-like patterns, the skin seemed to be cracked and blood oozed out from inside. Dao Yu, who fell to the ground, tilted his head to look at Xueqi's direction. His mouth kept spurting blood, his whole body twitching. At this time, it was not anger, but an uncontrollable reaction. The two punches just now were like a signal, like a pair of hands pushing a long domino. With a crash, the domino chain fell down. Dao Yu's sharp and unstoppable aura had declined to a terrible degree. Blood splashed out from the veins on Dao Yu's face. Because of the pain, his expression was distorted, looking more and more ferocious. His eyes were full of disbelief. Breaking through the shackles, he actually lost? If he was given 2 more days, no, as long as 1 day was enough, he would stabilize the power in his body and prepare well. He would definitely be able to beat this kid, he would definitely be able to. He couldn't let this kid steal the core seed. It was his own, Dao Yu's alone. He also wanted to build his own desert city, become a slave owner, and become an overlord. How could he die like this? Not reconciled. He was not reconciled. Lose to anyone, but not to this kid. No. Dao Yu's eyes were wide open, staring at Xueqi who was coming towards him. The stone chips and dust had fallen. His vision, which should have been clearer, had become blurred. He felt that the power of his whole body was sharply reduced. The powerful and surging feeling of breaking through the shackles seemed to be an illusion. The tide rose and then the tide receded. Finally, in his blurred vision, the figure that was getting closer and closer seemed to turn into a fire. There seemed to be a pattern in the flame, a double-horned pattern that he had long forgotten. Xueqi looked at Dao Yu, who had lost his breath of life. His heart was puzzled. His 2 punches, although he used a lot of strength, if Dao Yu's ability to break through the shackles, with that kind of physical strength, should not be so easy to die. The final performance was more like a violent backlash. Xueqi put his finger on Dao Yu's pulse and pressed it. It had indeed stopped beating. Unlike the strong appearance, Dao Yu's body seemed to be in a mess and seriously damaged. Was it because of the core seed? No, it was not necessarily because of the core seed. Xueqi was thinking when suddenly, the whole underground palace shook. A large number of stones fell from the top, and sand seeped down from the cracks above. Boom! Another one. It was like someone was deliberately slapping above. The seeping sand expanded like a waterfall, and large chunks of boulders began to fall. The illuminating crystal stone was a lot dimmer after the core seed was wrapped up. Now it was covered with sand and dust. It was even darker. Damn, who was up there in the end? Now was not the time to think about other things. Xiao hurriedly returned in the direction he came from. The torches inserted in the underground palace had long been extinguished, and the underground palace was dark. Fortunately, Xiao changed his vision and could still see the road. After Xiao ran away, the place where he had fought with Dao Yu made a roar and began to collapse. This underground palace, which had cost hundreds of slaves' lives, and now dozens of lives, was about to become a thing of the past. Chapter 340. Xiao ran out along the underground passage. The underground palace behind him was quickly collapsing, and the sound of falling stones was incessant. The place of collapse was getting closer and closer. Xiao pulled open the stone slab and drilled out. Suddenly sensing something, he tilted his head to the side. An arrow shot from behind, almost brushing past Xiao's hair. His longer hair was cut off by the tip of the arrow, and his ears and the side of his face were in pain from the strong wind brought by the arrow. Bang! The arrow shot into the sand not far from Xiao. The sand on the sand exploded, and a sand-colored flower bloomed. Without even looking back, Xiao propped himself up and flipped over. The sharp whistle-like sound rang out again. The arrow tore through the air, instantly traversing a distance of tens of meters, and shot into the place where Xiao had been. The sharp arrow with a cold light almost brushed past Xiao's waist and nailed into the sand, blowing up a nearly 1 meter deep sand pit. He didn't even have time to catch his breath. The moment he landed, another arrow came right at him. Xiao jumped up, turned around, and pulled out his sword. With a clang, he pushed away the arrow. Instead of retreating, he dodged and rushed towards the direction of the arrow. At this moment, Xiao focused all his energy on the archer. It was a person wearing a cloak. Her face was covered with a cloth, and her appearance couldn't be seen clearly. Her long hair was blown by the wind, and probably because of the long desert trek, it had lost its former softness and looked a lot more messy. The dust-stained cloth fluttered in the wind, and he could vaguely see a curvaceous figure. Under the cloak, there was some low-key metal armor that didn't shine as brightly. It was a woman, and her status wasn't low. To be able to wear metal armor, she was most likely a slave owner from the 3 major cities. The archer's eyes were fixed on Xiao. Although Xiao was still more than 50 meters away from the archer, he could still feel the archer's cold gaze, just like the murderous and chilling arrowhead pointing at Xiao. The other party held a strong bow, similar to the one Xiao had seen in Dao Ji's hands. He could feel the power of such a bow from the few arrows he had just fired. The difference was that the arrow shot by the other side was more threatening than the one shot by Dao Yu. Whoosh! Another one! With the vibration of the bowstring, the arrow spun at high speed in the air, creating a sharp whistling sound as it rubbed against the air. Like a meteor, it shot towards Xiao. Xiao quickly avoided the arrows that were shot. A sand lotus bloomed on the ground, and each time the place where it exploded was very close to Xiao. Ignoring the sand that exploded and splattered in all directions, Xiao locked onto the archer, including her every tiny movement and every look. He judged where the other party would shoot in the next moment, and then made a judgment to avoid the threat of the arrow. At this moment, Xiao's pupils were filled with the archer's shadow and the arrow's shadow. Seeing that Xiao was getting closer and closer, the other party didn't have many arrows in her hand. She directly threw the bow aside and pulled out a nearly 4-finger-wide double-edged sword. With a flick of her wrist, she drew a beautiful arc to meet Xiao. The blade of the sword brushed against the blade, splashing a series of sparks. The sword that stabbed towards Xiao's chest was pushed away by a strong and fierce force. Buzz! The sound of metal vibrating was accompanied by a chill that made one's scalp feel like it was going to explode. Bang! The ground trembled, and the two people separated. Xiao hurriedly retreated 10 steps. A giant beast ran in front of Xiao. Every step it took seemed to cause the ground to tremble, and its thick hooves stepped on the ground, splashing countless sand. It was this giant beast that had just stepped on the surface of the underground palace, and it had trampled hard. This heavyweight giant beast stood up and then stomped down hard. The curtain of sand that had been raised was forcefully split by the biting cold blade. Xiao glanced to the side. At this time, the place where the underground palace was located had collapsed by more than half. Looking over there was a very obvious huge pit. Xiao looked at the person and the beast not far away. He had never seen this giant beast in Beast City, but he could see that it had been enslaved. The person who had enslaved it was the woman in the cloak next to it. The other party's sword reflected a very dazzling light under the scorching sun, but at this moment, it was no longer attacking. Instead, it stood there quietly. The other party was standing on a sand dune, and Xueqi was standing at a lower position. Therefore, when the other party looked at Xueqi, it was looking down. The giant beast in front of Xueqi was swinging its thick hooves, as if waiting for its master's order to start trampling again. However, its goal was no longer the underground palace, but Xueqi, the little guy. Xueqi raised his eyebrows. He heard the sound of approaching quickly, and it was still behind him. Jiela, 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 jiela. Behind the dune, a huge snake head emerged. The snake turned over the sand dune and came towards Xueqi, but it did not get close. It stopped nearly 50 meters away from Xueqi. It was this giant snake that was shaking its tail that was making a rattling sound. However, Xueqi's main attention was not the huge rattlesnake that suddenly appeared, but the person standing on the snake's head. Xueqi. Xueqi did not expect to meet Xueqi here. We meet again. Xueqi's tone sounded like a friend that he had not seen for a long time. If it were not for the current situation, it would be easy to be regarded as a friend. The visitor was not good. This was what Xueqi thought at the moment. Why are you here? Xueqi asked. For a slave. Xueqi seemed to mention it casually. Very casually. Dao Yu. Xueqi's heart moved. Dao Yu is one of your people? Not exactly. He's dead. Xueqi said. It's better if he's dead. I'm going to die. Xueqi seemed to be more inclined to a dead Dao Yu. The dead are more obedient. After that, Xueqi turned his head and said in a chatty tone, however, since we meet here, you might as well come with us. What if I don't go? Xueqi looked at Xueqi, paying attention to the cloaked person on the other side to prevent a sudden attack. You refuse? When Xueqi said these 3 words, although it was a question, it carried a hint of irrefutable meaning. Indeed, now Xueqi was surrounded by enemies, 2 slave owners and 2 giant beasts. The situation was indeed very bad. Xueqi did not make a sound, and the other 2 did not speak, waiting for Xueqi's reply. Suddenly, Xueqi smiled, breaking the deadlocked atmosphere at the moment. I refuse. Xueqi was about to speak when his eyes focused, looking at a place. At Xueqi's feet, a blue creature drilled out from under the sand. It was a beetle. Then there was a rustling sound. A black beetle drilled out of the ground, as if to report, rushing out. The yellow sand was quickly occupied by black beetles. Not only around Xueqi, but further away, including behind Xueqi and the cloaked person, there were black beetles, like a black wave surging. Chapter 341. This situation was completely beyond Xueqi's expectations. Looking at his expression, he knew that he had always felt that victory was in his grasp and that everything was under control. But what he saw at this moment shocked him. It was also the first time he had encountered such a situation. Over there, don't look at Xueqi's calm face, hanging an unfathomable expression, but in his heart, he was roaring, fuck. He did not expect that a bug that he had enslaved to practice the method of enslavement would become such a situation. When he was in the Beast City, Xueqi found that the beetle had summoned a lot of younger brothers, and now it had directly turned into an army of bugs. The 2 behemoths at this moment also did not have the prestige they had before. The huge rattlesnake swung its tail and shook off all the bugs climbing up the snake's tail. However, more and more bugs crawled out of the sand, and they did not seem to know how to be afraid. They let the snake's tail shake again and again. Originally, the color of the sand could be seen from some gaps, but it was not long before the ground was black, and the bright carapaces reflected the light. The person in the cloak looked at the beetles that were gathering around her. Even if she was brave and thought that she was strong, she could not stay calm at this moment. She suddenly felt a sense of fear. She kicked away the beetles that were gathering around her and used her knife to sweep away the beetles that were blocking the way in front of her. Then, she jumped onto the back of the giant beast. After she jumped on the behemoth, the place where she had passed before, which had been cleared out of a narrow aisle, was covered by a wave of black bugs in the blink of an eye. The behemoth that stomped its hooves and shook the underground palace, at this moment, no matter how much it stomped its feet, it was useless. These bugs that crawled out of the ground did not know how to be afraid. Xueqi looked at the black wave of beetles and thought of something. He took out the dried meat from a bag that he carried with him. It was a long journey, so naturally, the food was well prepared. Unlike the slightly rough dried meat eaten by Xiaoxian and others, the dried meat brought by Xueqi was thinner, as if it had been pressed and then rolled into a roll. Xueqi unrolled the roll of meat a little, tore off a piece of meat half the size of a palm, and threw it out. The piece of meat fell about 20 meters away from the snake. The previously calm wave of insects instantly surged. Wherever the meat landed, the surrounding insects surged up. That place was like a wave that rose out of thin air, instantly rising higher. Xueqi, who had been staring at the other side, couldn't help but twitch his eyelids. What he was worried about was that if the beetle army was just a facade, they wouldn't have to worry too much. He had seen these beetles when he was in Rock Hill City. They were all active in the filthy places of the animal pens. However, the reality in front of him had completely shattered his hopes of being lucky. These bugs really ate meat. Xueqi had no doubt that if a bound giant beast was placed here and encountered such a beetle army, it would be tantamount to a death warrant thrown out by the Grim Reaper. The outcome would certainly be the same as that piece of meat just now. Just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. Obviously, such a small piece of meat did not satisfy the beetle army at all. Instead, it made the beetles even more anxious and ferocious. As if waiting for the order to attack, more and more beetles surrounded the two giant beasts, like hungry ghosts smelling the smell of food, greedily looking at the food in front of them. If they could speak, they would probably shout at this time. The enemy is difficult to deal with. Wait for the boss's order, brothers together. The hand of the person in the cloak holding the knife trembled a little. When walking in the desert, many people were afraid of encountering the dangerous desert beasts. But for her, the bigger threat was the small desert creatures, and they were in large groups. Even if she was knowledgeable, she had never encountered such a swarm of insects. Talking to them about feelings, reasoning, and conditions? What a joke! It was useless to talk. These insects did not have that high of intelligence to understand. The only thing she could do was to talk to the commander of these insects. The person in the cloak looked at Xueqi, moved her gaze to Xiaoxian, and finally stared at the blue beetle at Xiaoxian's feet. If she hadn't dropped the bow and arrow just now, if she could have killed the big blue beetle, how would the situation have changed? Almost at the moment she had the intention to kill, Xiaoxian looked over there. Meeting Xiaoxian's eyes, the person in the cloak felt a chill in her heart. She glanced at Xueqi and saw Xueqi shake his head, so she temporarily suppressed the thoughts in her heart. This person's perception was too keen. If he didn't succeed in one move and this brat fought with all his might, then both sides might suffer. She didn't want to risk her life here. The movement over at the Colosseum, was it you who caused it? Xueqi asked in a deep voice. That day, many people saw this kind of black beetle appear in the place where the battle beasts were locked up, but not many people thought deeper. After all, in the eyes of most people, this kind of beetle was too small and harmless, so no one cared. Xiaoxian did not refute, nor did he admit it. He just sneered. You say it as if you are innocent. The war in the desert was caused by you, right? You sent people to kill the Baishur city lord, right? Xueqi just smiled, neither denying nor admitting it. Forget it. That's it for today. I didn't expect you to have such ability. However, if you have something to look for me, you can go to Rock Tomb City. Xueqi said as he threw a golden metal plate to Xiaoxian, with the logo of Rock Tomb City on it. Originally, he intended to use force, but things were beyond his expectations. Xueqi changed his mind. He always liked to choose in a more favorable direction. Xiaoxian caught the plate that was thrown. I think that if I don't have anything to look for you, I will go back to the tribe after leaving. I will not be involved in the war in the desert. Xueqi was non-committal. Instead, he asked, do you know why Dao Yu chose to become a slave, and why he looked down on the tribes? Xiaoxian only said, I only know that Dao Yu is a traitor to the tribe and must be killed. But he didn't answer more, waiting for Xueqi's next words. Xueqi didn't care. He appeased the giant snake that had begun to become restless because of the swarm and said, because the slave owners will get stronger and stronger, and the tribe will eventually perish. Xiaoxian put on a look of disbelief. Nonsense. If it were other tribes at this moment, they would probably be furious, right? I'm not lying about this. If you don't believe me, you can pay more attention to see if the tribes are getting weaker and weaker. Are there problems with some of their abilities? Hearing this, Xiao Xian's first thought was the rain tribe. Yang Sui said that once their rain tribe's shaman could ask for rain, but later this ability slowly disappeared. Seeing Xiao Xian's expression, Xueqi's smile deepened. He continued, in fact, some people have already noticed it, but they just didn't dare to say it. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. Xueqi decided to put another bomb. You tribes are actually very stupid. You clearly found the facts, but you are unwilling to admit it. Stubborn, conservative, stupid. You don't know that the longer it takes, the more disadvantageous it is for them, and the closer they are to extinction. The only smart one is the Yanjiao tribe, but it is only half smart. The other half will still continue to go to destruction. Xiao Xian's pupils shrank as he stared at Xueqi. Did Xueqi's half-smart refer to the divided Yanjiao tribe? If so, he didn't think that Xueqi's half-smart referred to the current Yanjiao people. Then there was only one possibility left. The other half of the Yanjiao tribe that had been separated 1,000 years ago and had no news. Chapter 342. Xiao Xian still wanted to ask more, but Xueqi was not willing to say more. You go, we still have things to do here. Moreover, our people are almost here. When the time comes, even if you use these insects, you won't be able to fight. Of course, if you want to know more, you can go to Rock Tomb City to find me. Xiao Xian quickly judged the situation and decided to withdraw first. Let's go, Xiao Xian said from the big beetle at his feet. The blue beetle immediately opened the way, and where it passed, the insects spontaneously separated. Seeing this situation, Xueqi's eyes flashed thoughtfully. When Xiao Xian left the underground palace, he could not see Xueqi. Xiao Xian let Sapphire take its insects to forage for food, while he himself rushed to the place where he had agreed with Lei and Tua. As for Xueqi's words, Xiao Xian did not fully believe it, but he knew that it should be 3 parts true. After Xiao Xian left, the man in the cloak asked Xueqi with concern, "Are you not afraid that he will tell our things to the slave owners in other cities?" "He won't," Xueqi said. If Xiao Xian was smart enough and decided to not get involved, he certainly would not reveal more to others. Even if it was revealed, it didn't matter. At that time, the general trend was set. What if he participates? The cloaked man was still not at ease. If he participates, cooperating with such a person may not be a bad thing. While talking, in the collapsed underground palace, a lizard with thick scales crawled out. It was not too big, but it was very flexible. It came to Xueqi, opened its mouth, and spat out what it had swallowed. A dead man covered in lizard gastric juices appeared on the sand. It was the dead Dao Yu. Unlike the appearance when he died, Dao Yu at the moment seemed to have lost a lot of blood. Because of the wounds on his body, it was completely impossible to see his original appearance. Fortunately, although he was swallowed into the lizard's stomach, it was basically not digested. The flesh and bones were still there, but it looked shrunken. The man in the cloak saw Dao Yu's current appearance and asked Xueqi with some disgust, "Brother, he has become like this. Can he still be used?" "Of course." Xueqi looked at Dao Yu's current appearance with satisfaction. "When you're alive, you're not obedient. Then you can only use death." At the moment when Dao Yu broke through the shackles, he was actually not far from death. It was just that Xiao Xian's appearance had brought forward his death. The person in the cloak was originally monitoring Dao Yu. At that time, she was actually inside the underground palace, close to another exit, as far away as possible from the core seed. As for the giant beast that was following her, it buried its body in a sand dune somewhere outside. When Dao Yu and Xiao Xian fought, she wanted to help. However, she noticed that Dao Yu had broken through the shackles and did not go up to help. Instead, she ran out and summoned the giant beast to trample the underground palace. He wanted to kill Xiao Xian and then take away Dao Yu's body. Unexpectedly, Xiao Xian was too strong, and there were also those insects. "I can't sense the core seed here." The cloaked man frowned. "The core seed must have been taken away by that kid," Xueqi said. "Impossible. I didn't feel the core seed on him at all." The person in the cloak could not believe it, but seeing Xueqi's determined look, she knew that the possibility was great. "Or should we send someone to kill that kid?" The cloaked man said. "If there is no absolute certainty, at this time, it's better to take less risks. Those tribesmen, when they fight for their lives, will not care about anything. There are only a few people who can be tempted with benefits. Xueqi said. Seeing that there were already a few birds flying over in the air, Xueqi said, I'll go back first. I believe that Snowfield City has already started a war with Huaqiao City. Then do I have to stay in Baishur City to watch? The person in the cloak asked. No, you go and tell Su Luan that he can go to Baishur City. The person who came over by the bird wrapped Dao Yu's body with a cloth, put it in a long wooden box, and then left with Xueqi. As for Xiao taking away the core seed, it was better to talk about it after the desert was finished. At the moment, they had no time to think about it. How much could a tribesman who had never been exposed to this kind of new thing think about it? Even those tribesmen who often came to the desert to rob, only robbed some ores. Not the core seed that made these ores. Because those tribesmen simply did not know that there was a core seed. Besides, if the core seed was not used properly, it was possible to exterminate the tribe. The tribesmen were so stupid. How could they think of the correct way to use the core seed? Thinking of this, the cloaked man was not worried and went in the direction of Loya City. Xueqi also put his main thoughts on the war in the desert. At this time, whether Rock Hill City's plan that had lasted for 3 generations could succeed or whether Rock Hill City could unify the desert depended on this big storm. However, they did not know that Xiao was not an ordinary tribesman. The use of the core seed, Xiao had even guessed most of it. The rest only needed time to prove the guess. With the core seed, Xiao rushed to the place where Lei and Tuo were. When Xiao saw Lei and Tuo, the two were anxious. Xian, I finally see you. Seeing that Xiao was safe and sound, Lei and Tuo's hanging heart finally relaxed. These days, slaves have been entering the desert. Xian, is there going to be a scuffle in the desert? Tuo asked. Well, it has happened. During this time, the slaves you saw entering the desert, what was each team like? Xiao asked the two to elaborate. Listening to the words of the two, Xiao found that the slaves entering the desert this time, a small number were from other cities, and most of the others may be from Xueqi's people. Thinking of the buildings and increasing slaves he saw in the place where he met Yan Shua, maybe it was Xueqi who used it to raise soldiers. Xiao only knew one place. He did not know about similar places. Maybe there were more. Without saying more, Xiao took out a piece of cloth and took a charcoal pencil to write on it. Lei and Tuo had experienced a lot of such things. When they saw Xiao began to write again, they spontaneously stood guard around. When Xiao finished writing, he carefully put the cloth away and handed it to Lei and Tuo together with the animal skin bag with the core seed. You leave now and leave the desert. The things in this animal skin bag are very important. Don't open it privately. You must take it to the tribe and give it to the shaman. Let the shaman see the content of the cloth first. Remember, look at the content of the cloth first. Don't open it before you see it. Moreover, don't let other people know about this, including the people of our tribe. As for what the shaman decides after seeing the content of the cloth, I don't care. If you can't take this thing back, then hide it first. If you can't hide it, then throw it away. Don't let people know you have this. Seeing Xiaoxian's serious face, Lei and Tuo carefully wrote down Xiaoxian's words. Xian, you can rest assured that even if we die, we won't let other people know. But as they talked, the two always felt that something was wrong. Hey, Xian, you won't leave with us. The two just put down their hearts and hung high again. Xiao shook his head. You go first. I have something to do. What else? Is it important? Hearing Xiao say that he will stay in the desert, the two were anxious. Very important. How important? It's about the survival of the tribe. Now the two couldn't say a word. After telling Lei and Tuo, Xiao had to persuade Cha-Cha. This guy was angry. It was rare to persuade people and birds. Xiao looked at the sky, took out a rope and divined. He raised his hand and pointed to a direction. You go that way, it may be safer. Xian, after we send the things back, if you haven't returned to the tribe, we will come to you, Tuo said. Xiao still wanted to say something, but the two had already jumped on the eagle's back and flew into the sky. Looking at the eagle in the sky leaving in the direction he pointed, Xiao rested on a stone for a while and turned back to the depths of the desert. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.